Noelle Stevenson is a one-of-a-kind person, storyteller, and artist. She sat down with me to discuss her path from South Carolina all the way to creating and showrunning a TV series by the age of 24. She's had a long but inspiring personal journey, and I know you'll be moved by her story. Enjoy this conversation with Noelle Stevenson today on Between the Sheets. Noelle Stevenson, thank you for
That's
joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's so exciting.
This is a Vous Carré.
Ooh,
Yes, it's a
fancy.
New Orleans-based drink.
That is
That's pretty good.
amazing. That's delicious.
That's really
I
good.
love that.
Little rye whiskey, a little vermouth, Benedictine, some cognac, some bitters. That's delicious. It's nothing like drinking at noon.
I love it.
The writer's life. The writer's life.
You got to do it.
Where?
Brain juice.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it unlocks the creativity.
Brings out the flavors
That's what my uncle
and the
used to say.
creativity.
Yeah. Where are you from?
I'm from South Carolina originally.
Whereabouts in South Carolina?
Columbia. It's
Ooh.
right in the middle. There's a swamp and
There's
a
a
river.
swamp?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you play in the swamp as a kid? Or was it
Oh,
like
we're
a
always in the
scary?
swamp,
Oh, you
yeah.
were? Swamp kids?
It's just there.
Like garbage pail kids?
Yeah, we just went down to the river and watched people like float by on tubes with like a whole cooler inside the tube, and like they're all
Really?
tied together into like mini floating like raft cities. That was our entertainment. We just watched people do that, and sometimes they'd flip over, and that was kind of the goal.
Is it really slow though? Because it's a swamp?
Usually,
Oh, yeah.
lately
yeah.
we've gotten a lot of rain, so now it's more fun to go because it's like people don't realize that now they're rapids, so
Oh,
their
yeah.
whole cooler is just gone, and they're like, oh god.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
Keystone Light that went
It's the
overboard.
only thing to do in Columbia, South Carolina. That's not true. It's a very nice museum.
But you get sick of that really fast.
Yeah, I mean, how many times can you see the model megalodon before you're like, old news?
Did the megalodon come from the swamp?
Presumably.
If I grew up by a swamp, I would come up with
I mean,
all
that's
kinds
where
of
megalodons
crazy...
live,
Yeah.
so you know.
I saw the sci-fi movie.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of kid were you then?
Well, I was a weird kid. I was homeschooled. I'm one of 5 kids, so
5 kids.
yeah.
How many boys, girls, brothers, sisters? What's the game?
I've got 2 of each. So I've got older brother, older sister, younger sister. I'm right in the middle.
You're right in
It's
the
very
middle.
symmetrical. It's easy to keep it all straight.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's we were a big family. My mom homeschooled us all. And you know, there were a lot of other homeschoolers in our area, so we were like, you know, I had friends. But
Yeah, you didn't have that thing where you felt like isolated from
yeah,
everybody
no, we
because...
weren't like on a farm in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere, although I
yeah.
did know people like that. Like
Yeah.
there were people who were those kind of homeschoolers,
Right.
but yeah, it was like a lot of times being homeschooled and being one of 5 just means you're kind of just on your own. So you have to figure stuff out for yourself, which is, you know, not the worst thing.
You grew up a little fast that way, probably.
Yeah. We built a lot of really dangerous tree houses, did a lot of the chores. That's kind of the experience.
Yeah. How long did like the whole through high school, or did you end up going to like a public high school or something? Or were you homeschooled the whole
Yeah, I
time?
ended up going to public high school when I was a junior. So I went for 2 years. It was like such a culture shock. Like it was just like going from being like, you know, I was like the coolest kid when I was like a homeschooler. I thought I was, and that's all that really matters. I was just very confident, and I was like, I'm gonna like cut up some socks and wear them on my arms and like make arm warmers, and everyone was like, wow. That must be cool because
Mhm.
she seems to
She-
think it's cool.
If you're confident doing something. then, yeah.
Exactly. And so then I go to school and I'm like, oh.
Nobody else is doing this.
I don't think I'm cool, actually.
Yeah.
Might have gotten the facts wrong there. But yeah, I mean, it's not a bad way to grow up. You're just like sort of just doing your own thing the whole time. And yeah, it was just a lot of running around and teaching myself math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 years of being in that school setup versus like all those years of homeschool. You said it was a culture shock. What was the
Yeah.
biggest thing to get used to? Just the amount of people or learning in that environment?
Yeah, I mean, it was like the amount of people. I think the thing that was hardest for me is like when you're homeschooled, you just get a stack of books and it's like, all right, do these books. Like
Mm,
finish what's inside and then you're done. So, but then you go to school and it's like, well, today we're going to watch a movie. It's Ellen Brockovich and it's,
yeah.
it's somehow related to economics.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, all right, cool. Like, do I have to be here? Like, I want to go do some other stuff. And they're like, no, it's part of the curriculum. Or like you're doing a test and it's like, I'm done. Can I just go? And they're
Mhm.
like, no, you have to wait. Everyone's still doing their test. I'm like, but I'm done.
It moves at a lot slower pace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because it's just like when you're kind of making your own schedule and just, it's like, all right, you don't have to do math today if you don't want to.
Mhm.
But if you don't, you're going to do 2 lessons of math tomorrow. So, it's just kind of like you can do whatever you want, but you
Yeah.
have to pay the consequences.
Right.
So then like being in school where everyone is like, no, here's someone who's going to tell you exactly how this is going to go and like what time you get to do everything. If there's a pep rally, you have to go to that. Even if you don't feel very peppy, you still
Yeah.
got to go. And
Yeah.
I got really good at like sneaking out of school.
You did?
Honestly, yeah, just making a break for it, like across the like baseball field and like, you know, I was
Just
just like,
seeing
no
running.
way. Honestly, mostly I just like skipped out on class to go like paint sets in the drama club because, like I said,
Mm.
I was like not cool, but
Yeah.
also very cool. So
Were you in the drama club?
I was in the drama club.
So did
Yes.
you do plays and
I
stuff like
did,
that?
yeah, yeah. I was really big into plays. Actually, the homeschool group I was in was really big into plays too. So we had actually a bunch of directors who would get very like avant-garde with the like homeschool plays, and we'd like charge like ticket prices, and it
Oh,
was a
shit.
big deal.
Where would you
Like,
put them on? Like in someone's backyard
no, we
or
would like rent out like real ass theaters, like
Whoa.
big like auditoriums.
Yeah.
We did this one. It was this was even like before, or maybe this was right after O Brother Where Art Thou. We were supposed to be doing the Odyssey. And so we all got cast as our parts. We went home for the winter break. And then like when we came back to school, the director had a vision and she's like, it's gonna be Appalachian, the Odyssey.
Oh.
So all the characters changed. Like my friend who had gotten cast as Athena, like the royal goddess of war, she ended up as a shadow puppet of an old lady named Aunt Theta in a rocking chair who just like shook her fingers. And it was like, so that was like, I
That's a
think the
unique
biggest, yeah,
interpretation.
exactly. But it was like so much fun because we had like a bluegrass band and we had like a Greek chorus, but we all had like rain sticks. And it was like, it was, it was kind of like,
That's kinda
it was
cool.
kind of cool. It
Yeah.
was like a big deal.
Yeah. Odyssey's
Yeah.
boring as is. You
I
gotta spice it
know.
up a little
There's
bit.
like, in the first 5 minutes, our whole like 10-year-old class like died in the Trojan War. And
Mm.
it was like super exciting. They had like a red strobe light. It was like, it was fancy.
Went
Yeah.
all out.
I know.
Did you like being on stage?
I did. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's something that I wish I'd kind of kept up with as I got older, but it's a big time commitment. So I just like
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like yeah, I was Circe in the Odyssey, so that was
Ooh,
fun.
yeah.
Yeah. Got to turn all
The meaty
the guys
part.
into pigs. So
Uh-huh.
that was really fun. Yeah.
How did you guys pull that off with the
Oh, they
production?
just crawled around.
They just crawled
Yeah.
around?
And made oinking sounds. I felt very powerful.
I bet.
Yeah, I know.
Can we rehearse this one more time? I'm really enjoying watching this happen. What age were you when you realized I like to write or I like to draw, or you started to notice that creative side sort of bubbling up in you?
I think it was always like I was one of the kids who just like I any kind of toy I could get if I could tell the story about it. Like that was the way I played with my toys. So
Mm.
like I loved Star Wars action figures. I was a huge Star Wars fan, so I had this like bag of Star Wars action figures. I'd carry it everywhere. And any moment I got like a quiet moment, I would dump them out on any table I could find. And my friends would come and I would just honestly like we'd start out playing together and then it would turn into me just reenacting, just acting out this like epic whatever. Like it
Right.
was like, reinventing the characters, coming up with these like world-ending stakes, and I didn't know enough to know that this was like a deeply uncool thing to do. So just being like the corner at church, and I'd just be like, Han is coming, and then and people would come over to make fun of me, and they'd end up like kind of standing and watching after a while because
Yeah.
it's like I got really into these stories. They had this really intricate mythology and everything, and
Mhm.
so that was the kind of thing I did all the time, like, with whatever I had at hand. I had, like, colorful rocks, and I gave them all personalities, and I would just, like, move them
Like pet
around and, like
rocks. Yeah,
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 yeah.
like, it was just whatever I could find, so it was like I always had that interest in telling stories. I was so spacey, I'd kinda space out and just think up stories in my head just all the
Let your
time.
imagination go.
Yeah, yeah, so it's like I felt just constantly guilty all through my childhood because we were really a religious family.
Mm.
So we'd go to church and I'd just like the whole time, I'd just be like, "All right, it's time to check in with my like Star Wars like fan fiction ripoff thing in my
Mhm.
head and like see
Mhm.
where all the characters are and like
Mhm.
and then I'd like at the end I'd be like, "Oh shit, I didn't listen to the sermon at all." And
If I
like,
get quizzed on this, I'm
"Oh
fucked.
God, I'm sorry." Like,
Yeah.
Jesus,
Yeah.
forgive me. Yeah, I like had a lot of guilt about that, but I like couldn't help it. It's just like my brain's just like, "All right."
I used to sneak my Nintendo Power magazines into church under my, like, shirt, and then we would always have to sit on the front row, so I would hide it in the pew, and I would be, like, reading through my Nintendo magazine, like, hoping nobody I got busted so many times because they would quiz me on the sermon, and I wouldn't know shit.
See, there's no way they could tell with me. I'm just like thousand-yard stare, and they're like, "She
Mhm.
must just be thinking about God,
She must
just
just be,
being
like, soaking
pious,"
in.
and
Yep.
like, and I'm just like, "And then they're gonna fly a spaceship into another spaceship, and it's gonna like," like
You're
it's
coming up
just
with,
yeah.
like, alternate arcs for each
Yeah.
character and
Yeah, and I can never remember a time when I wasn't doing that. Like, I always had
mm,
some kind of just, like, epic story going in my head, like, that was just, like I would think about it all the time, like, do sketches for the characters, and I think, like, everyone kinda knew that I was always drawing, so they knew I was into art. It took a while for me to realize that, like, what it really was storytelling, was writing.
that's
I
what you were
never
really trying to
identified,
teach
like,
me.
as a writer, until adulthood, honestly, when I
Mm,
just kind of, like, was like, "Well, I wanna draw comics, so I'll start writing my own stuff to draw." And then I was like, "Oh, wait, I think, like, both of these things together, the art and the storytelling and the writing, all of it, that's what I like."
mm.
All of those things.
Putting
So,
all those pieces together and
yeah,
coming up with a finished product.
yeah.
So that ended up leading to you wanting to go to art school?
Yeah, yeah, it was
Pursue that?
interesting. It was like, I didn't really again, being homeschooled, there's certain things that you sort of, there's some holes in your education, I guess, so it was hard to get art classes. We had, like, a group for homeschoolers where, like, parents would kinda teach, just the kids as a group, like, what they knew, so we do, like that was where we did the theater, like, the
Right.
plays and stuff. We do choir, ballroom dancing, creative writing, stuff like that. So, it was just, like, almost like extracurriculars.
Mm.
Extracurriculars.
I know, I
Bleh.
have a hard time with that too,
Um
and most words.
Yeah, words are just really hard.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, like, that was where I kinda got my art training, but a lot of it was kind of like, "Alright, we're gonna make, like, a paper mache Parthenon, like, that's what we're gonna do." And so it was kinda hard to, like, learn how to make art. Most of what I did was just drawing on scraps of paper, like,
Right.
whatever I could find.
Yeah.
So, it actually wasn't until I went to public school that I got into, like, an art class, and my teacher was, like, immediately was like, "You need to apply to art school." And I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I didn't know you could go to school for art.
Mm.
Like, a whole school just for art, like, that kinda blew my mind. Um but she was just the sweetest lady, like, she just really believed in me, and she brought in all these recruiters, basically just for my benefit,
Wow.
from different schools, from different art schools, and that's when I just started being like, "Okay, this is what I wanna do, this is where I wanna go." And just it was, like, really with her encouragement that I kind of figured out how to apply this thing that I'd always loved doing, into an actual, like, life
Mm.
plan. That was when I first, got the idea to go to art school, that was when I first started applying, and, it's really the reason that I ended up going to art school.
Wow.
Yeah,
And you went to school in Baltimore?
I did,
Yeah.
yes.
At,
Mhm.
help me, what's the name of it?
MICA,
MICA,
yeah,
yeah, that's
Maryland
right.
Institute College of Art.
Yes.
So I went in as an illustration major, which was
Straight out of high
good.
school?
Yes.
Just straight in?
Mhm.
No time off, no, I'm gonna go
No,
take a year and
no, I actually
explore
skipped a grade
the
even.
You did?
Yeah, yeah.
What did you skip?
I skipped my sophomore year. Yeah.
Eh,
Yeah. No, it's
eh.
so yeah, I ended up at college when I was 17.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because 'Cause you're in a new city,
Yeah.
you're, only not homeschooled for 2 years of your
Yeah.
life, so that's a big jump. What
It
was it
was,
like?
it was huge. It changed everything. I mean, like, growing up in South Carolina, growing up religious, growing up conservative, growing up homeschooled, like, you just don't you're not exposed to certain things. You're not
Mm.
exposed to certain ideas. I knew they existed. Like, for example, I had maybe never met a gay person before I went to college.
Right, yeah.
And so it was just kind of this concept before that. So
Mm.
going to school and having a friend group that was almost entirely queer, it was certainly like a pretty steep learning curve. And it was like almost immediately, like, I was like, wait a second, I think gays are pretty okay, actually. Like, this is awesome.
Well,
Like,
probably because everything that you had been told or
mhm.
taught or had been preached to you or whatever else was the opposite of that,
Yeah,
so
exactly. It was
yeah.
like, hate the sin, not the sinner. And so I was
Mhm.
sort of like ready for that going into college. Like, they kind of warn you when you're a Christian kid. They're like, you're going to go out into the world and they're going to try and corrupt you. Like, you
Mhm.
can't listen to them. Like, so I was ready. I like had my like Bible verses memorized and everything. And
Ready to
then it was
combat
just
the
like,
darkness.
no one there is really trying to like change your mind. No one there is trying like gonna sit down and argue with you, which I kind of expected.
Mm.
But it is just like you're like hanging out with some people that you like, and you're like, oh, like you're really cool and you seem really great. And I just like in my heart, I'm starting to no longer believe that this thing about you that it's wrong, like I was told it was. It seems like it's great actually, like it's beautiful. Um and so that's really what starts to kind of make a difference, what kind of starts to just change your whole mind about everything. So it was just this
Yeah.
version of the world that I'd never really seen before, and these options for being a person, for being
Mhm.
in the world,
Mhm.
that I'd never really experienced before, and
Yeah.
got it all at once.
Yeah,
So
yeah, big time, right? Thrown in at
yeah,
the deep end.
yeah.
Was there friction for you because everyone had kind of told you and taught you, and like I said, preached at you about
Hmm.
that thing, and then you go and experience it, and you go, "This is way different than what I was
Yeah.
told." Was there I've experienced some of this, which is why I'm
Hmm.
asking you. Was there a weird friction of going like, "Ugh, they kinda had it wrong," and,
Yeah.
because for my family, there's a sense of innocence to it. It wasn't
Hmm.
nobody was homophobic, nobody was
Yeah.
rude, nobody was racist, nobody was like, "They're going to hell." It wasn't
Hmm.
anything like that. It was just presented as this is sort of not the right way to go. It very,
Yeah.
very, yeah, hate the sin, love the sinner, as
Yeah.
they say, right? Which is such bad
Yeah.
a bad phrase in retrospect, but I had that friction. Did you feel any of that? Like
Oh, absolutely, right away. Because
yeah.
that's the thing, it's like, the idea, of course, is that you are supposed to love everybody, but the idea is always there. It's always really plain to everyone involved. It's like, it would be better if you were not this way.
Mhm,
It would
mhm.
just be like, God will forgive you either way, but, like, it would really be better if you weren't.
Right.
And that comes out, like, it came out with just, like, the way that, like, I saw people through my childhood just kind of talk about it or interact with it at all. It's just like, like it would just be like we have to believe that one day they'll see the error of their ways and just,
Mm, yeah.
and so that was kind of the friction immediately where of just being like at first I'm like, like wide-eyed, like deer in the headlights at everything. There's just so many naked people. Like so many naked people at art school. It's just like
Yeah.
immediately they're just like clothes off, body painting,
Uh-huh.
running around. Halloween is the trip because everyone tries to figure out like even more than the normal like slutty Halloween costumes. It's like high concept slutty
Oh,
Halloween
yeah.
costumes. So it's
Right.
like everyone is like maximum amount of naked. And I'm just like, what?
Yeah. Big shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was that right away. And I think I almost even like lumped it in. I'm like, people are just being like, crazy. They're just,
Mhm.
like I'm all innocent. And then it's like, oh no, like this is like, these people are my friends. These people, like, this is not something that it's not like them being crazy party kids. It's not them like, doing something just to stick it to the man. This is a big part of who they are.
Mm.
This is who they love. This is who they like, are interested in spending the rest of their life with, And so that was what I'd never quite, I think, realized before, having never been exposed to that. And I was still like a really long way away from realizing that, like, there's this super personal aspect of that for me.
Mhm.
But immediately it was a culture shock. Immediately there was a friction because it was still like I think in my head I was trying to be like, okay, yeah, you're my friends, I love you, but also like, you know, maybe
Yeah.
like. it would be better if you weren't.
Mhm,
And that's the
mhm.
thing that I think that, like, gay people everywhere feel, which is like, it's this constant, it's kind of the saddest thing, I think, when you're just like, all right, people are being cool to me, people are being kind, but like, they don't really love me,
Mm,
They
mm.
wish I was different. Like,
Right.
that's like, so I think, I mean, and that was just one of the ways, like, everything changed. Like, my whole worldview changed because for the first time, I was able to actually see different ways of living my life and sort of like compare them to each other.
Yeah,
Because
'cause
so
that's all
far
you
it
had
only
known.
ever just
Yeah.
been one thing. And
Yeah.
then it's like, it wasn't that the people were like, well, here's why God isn't real. I'm going to argue with me, which I expected.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and instead it was just people being like, oh yeah, I mean, whatever. Like, we're just doing our thing. But like, it gave me a chance to kind of be like, oh, maybe this thing is not what I grew up thinking it was.
Mm.
So that was where it was a huge, like the first 2 years of my college, like, experience was just almost like this crash. It was like
Crash, yeah.
it was dramatic,
Isn't it interesting too, though, how you grew up to believe that those people aren't truly happy?
Mhm.
Because this is sort of the only source of true happiness,
Yeah.
and then you get to art
Yep.
school and you're like, "There's a bunch of really happy people who are more comfortable being themselves than even some of the people that you probably grew up
Yeah.
with," or that, that had
Well,
to
and
be
that's
interesting.
exactly it. I mean, like, I remember actually I was, I think, 19 years old at this time. I was having a full-on crisis, and, my friend who was just always like, super kind and gentle with me even when I was like, just being the biggest doofus of all time. Like, we had this night where like I was working the night shift at the time. So every night from like midnight to 8 a.m. I was up.
Wow.
And so she would come sometimes when I was like, "Hey, it's 5 a.m. and I'm freaking out."
Mhm,
Like, she would
mhm.
come and like sit with me. And so on this night I was just like, I was having a full-on freak out, and I was just like, I remember saying it. I was like, "But you can't honestly be happy, right? Like,
Mm.
you can't be happy unless you're a Christian." And it was something that, like, I had always grown up believing, but as soon as I said it, and she gives me this look that's like, "What?" Like, of
Yeah.
course I'm happy. Like, of
Uh-huh.
course I've been happy. Of course true happiness is possible. I might not be happy all the time, but neither are you.
Mhm.
Like, and I certainly was not at that time. So it's like this simple basic thing that's just like true happiness is not possible unless you do this, this, and this with your life, unless you're
Mhm.
going in this direction. And you just realize it's like, oh, I don't think that's true.
Mm.
And like there are
Mm.
other ways. There are other ways to achieve that like personal fulfillment. And but it was kind of a big rude awakening for me.
Did it cause any friction with your family? Or was it something you kept to yourself for a while and just you're like, "I'm kind of thinking and my ideas, things are starting to change."
Yeah. I think I was lucky with my family. They were certainly a lot more, not militant, but rigid maybe when I was growing up, about what we believed, about where we went to church. We went to a very traditional, Protestant church.
Mhm.
By the time I left for college, my family as a whole started undergoing a change as well. I think that's why they were okay with me. Like, I knew a lot of people who were like, you graduate from homeschool and you go to a Christian college, and
Mm.
then you never really leave your church family. Don't risk being corrupted by the world, like that kind of
Right,
thing.
right.
But my family was also kind of undergoing, like, I think every member of my family sort of in their own way hit the same wall I did. And
Mhm.
they're still religious. They're still, like, they have a lot of faith, but I think that everyone was sort of starting to try and figure out what it meant for them in the
Mm.
world. And so honestly, like, I was really scared to tell them when I stopped going to church, but they were way more understanding of it than I ever thought they'd be,
Wow.
and it hasn't been easy. Like, there's been a lot of times and there's still been that friction, but, um, I think it was something that, that they related to
Mm.
also in their own way. I think that they were also kind of feeling the same,
Doubts
like,
or questions?
rigid, like,
Oh.
guidelines of just, like, what it meant to be this type of person of faith in the South, and, like,
Mhm.
being like, "Well, you know, but this puts a limit on us in this way." Like, if when it puts a limit on, like, who you're allowed to, like, have real love and empathy for, like, that's when you start being like, "Wait a second, this is not like, this is something's wrong,"
Something's
you
not
know?
lining up.
So
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think I was lucky in that way. It was, yeah, they were very, understanding, very respectful of my choice, and, yeah, coming out as gay to them a little bit later was its own whole thing. But like,
Yeah.
it was I was lucky in that way.
Mm.
Yeah.
While you're in art school, at some point, you start to come up with an idea for what ended up becoming a graphic novel.
Yeah.
Tell me how that happened.
Yeah, so, there was this turning point for me in college. I think even as a result of everything that we're talking about, this kind of like crisis of just like, what am I doing? Who am I supposed to be? And I had a lot of trouble sort of voicing for all that I, was there to communicate with the world, to tell my story. I was having trouble doing that until I found comics.
Mm.
So I didn't think of myself as a writer. I'd done writing before, but, I didn't think I was any good at it. It wasn't until I found comics where I got to draw and write and do all of those things together, that overlap between the art and the writing, and it's just like pure storytelling.
Right.
And that became my outlet. Like that was sort of what brought me around that corner, was that I could suddenly voice my ideas in a way that made more sense to me
Mm.
and to the people reading it. I was able to sort of like take the feelings that I was having, all of these conflicting feelings, and put them into a form that made sense.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that was when Nimona started. It really just started out as an exercise. I
Mm.
wanted to see if I could do it.
Mm.
And so I made these characters, and Nimona herself she was almost this alter ego for me, because everything that we're talking about here, none of this transition, nothing about this was easy or pretty, or it hurt. It hurt so much
Mm.
all the
Yeah.
time. So that was what led to the creation of this, this character who in so many ways kind of embodied those messy emotions, that kind of anger, that fear, the striving to be your own person even when other people are trying to impose something on you. And that was the start of it.
Wow.
And I did the first 2 pages just to see if I could, and then I did the next 4 pages, and then I did the next 10 pages, and then I was like, "You know what? I wanna finish this. I wanna
Mm.
make a full story with this character in this world," and so I started doing that, and I started putting it online as a webcomic.
Right. Yeah.
I think that happened my junior year, so it
Mm.
was yeah, I was already kind of figuring out kinda how to use comics to communicate, my feelings in a perhaps more, constructive way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, that was the start of Nimona, and for the next 3 years, I was focused on telling that story.
It picked up traction online,
Mhm.
and then eventually, um, someone reached out
Yeah.
and said, "This is pretty fucking good."
Yeah.
What was that like? What did you anticipate? Because it seems to me like you were first doing it for you,
Mhm.
and it was part of a process that you needed to go through,
Mhm.
and it was a way for you to be more articulate
Mhm.
than just trying to explain yourself
Yeah.
verbally.
Mhm.
Um, and you could take your time, and you could
Yeah.
really flesh out what you wanted to do with it. But did you anticipate when you put it online, like somebody's going to want to grab this?
I really didn't know if anyone else would even like it, you
Mm.
know? It was such a,
Seems
like
so personal.
it was, and there had been, there had been this amazing surge of web comics, that had really inspired me, and it just seemed like people were telling these stories that you couldn't tell anywhere else,
Mm.
the characters that don't get to be the main characters in any other story. So I saw that was my model of success, and that was sort of like, you could kickstart this. You
Mm.
could you could sell it at conventions. Like that's what being a successful webcomic artist looked like to me. Um, and it had sort of been built from the ground up by these like amazing visionaries in the webcomic
Yeah.
world. So I was really just following in their footsteps, and I read, like serialized adventure stories. Like I love Delilah Dirk by Tony
Mhm.
Cliff. Like that
Mhm.
was a big inspiration. It was a serialized adventure story. And then obviously like Kate Beaton's like Hark a
Mhm.
Vagrant
Mhm.
was just like, mind blowing to me because we had a similar like kind of sketchy drawing style. And
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
oh my God, like I can still communicate my ideas without having to do this hyper realistic, hyper detailed thing that art school has convinced me is good illustration.
Mm.
I can lean into what I want to be doing. And so that was what inspired me. And those are the people that I like really looked up to and was trying to emulate. And so the idea that like that even that it would draw an audience was kind of like, I don't know if I really believed that that would happen
Mm.
because it's kind of this chubby butch girl is the main character, and it's like, it's drawn in this naive style. I don't know. I don't know if in my head it was ever like it took off. It like skyrocketed. It was just like I was doing my thing. I had a really, really great group of people who were reading and commenting and showing interest. And then I got the call from an agent
Mhm.
who had found me through my fan art, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, I had done a bunch of Avengers fan art, and
Yeah,
he
yeah,
like
yeah.
kind of found my blog and found my webcomic, and he reached out to me and he was like, "Yeah, I think we can sell this."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay, cool. I'm super about to get scammed by this like random man."
That's what you thought first
Yeah,
off.
I
Yeah,
super
yeah,
did.
yeah. I would have too, yeah.
But he actually like, I was very careful and like went to visit, and he like kind of took me to these publishers, and I was like, "All right, cool. So I guess this is real."
Was that
And
scary? Was it
oh,
once
super.
you realized
Yeah.
it was real, I mean, was it
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't realize it was real. It still
Mm.
didn't. Even when he was like, even when I signed with him and he became my agent, he's still my agent. I was like, "Yeah, okay." He's like, "I'll be, you go back to school." I was still in school. I was a junior still. He's like, I was a senior at that point. I think I was a senior. And so he was like, "I'll be shopping it around, you go back to school, just keep drawing it." I hadn't finished the script. I had like a rough outline. I was still drawing the book. I was like, nothing is gonna happen.
Mhm.
And then I got the call, and I was like in a critique in my like senior class, and they're like, HarperCollins is interested. And
Bullshit.
I know. And I was
Yeah.
just like standing outside, like I could excuse myself from the class to step outside and take the call. I was just like, all right, cool, cool, cool. And I went back into the class, and I just kind of like I didn't say anything to anybody, and but I was like shaking the whole time. Like it
Yeah.
was just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
We finished the class, and I just went back outside, and my friend, my like precious dear friend who was just always, always like there for me. Um, I just like I burst into tears, and
Mm.
I like told her, and I was like, "This is happening." And she's like, "Well, they're there.
Yeah.
Sorry that
Yeah.
success is happening to you."
Uh-huh. But
Um,
your body has no other way
but
to
yeah, it was
respond
just
'cause, like, shock
it was
and
like what,
awe.
and the numbers they were saying, all of it was just thoroughly unreal to me, and it was just
Mm.
like, "Is this happening? Is this gonna be
Yeah.
my life? Is this gonna be something that is my book, my dumb little webcomic? Is it gonna be a book
Mm.
that you can get at the library, at the
Mhm.
like Barnes and Noble? Like what?" And
Seems
it was
so
just
out there. It seems so out there.
yeah, my world
Yeah.
was like going to the coffee shop, getting a bagel, going to class, working all night, you know,
Mhm.
drinking like cheap wine on the weekends.
Mhm.
Like it was like you don't think of the like it's so I had no way to process it.
Yeah.
I knew it was happening.
Mhm.
And then when it happened, it still totally floored me. So,
Did things move quickly after that?
yeah.
And then you're like, "Oh, shit, now I have to
Yeah.
actually finish this thing," and,
I mean, I'm still amazed at the amount of just like faith that they put in me
Mm.
because it was like, again, I hadn't finished the script. I had an outline, I knew how it ended, but I hadn't finished it. And I was still drawing it. And I was kind of drawing it like the night before I posted it. So there was like
Mm.
no backlog. There was no like, here's when I'm gonna like finish this arc or whatever. Like it was just, I was just winging it.
Wow.
And so they trusted in that enough to like buy it based off of that. And my script, I remember the script that I sent them, it was like, because I was always like, I will be the only one reading this. So it was just like, I didn't spell out the characters' names. I just wrote their first initial.
Mm.
And I just abbreviated everything and it was a mess. It was a total mess. Like the worst formatted script I've ever written. It was just in a text edit document.
Yeah.
And my saint of an editor like read through that and gave me notes on it. But I was like, how did you
Mhm.
even understand that? There are like 4 characters whose names start with B, and I just call them all B. And
Uh-huh.
it's just like,
They're so used to the
I know.
writing quirks, though.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Well, yeah. And then they just let me and they're like, "Yeah, you can keep posting it online." So I was like, "Cool," because I definitely want to finish it as a
Mhm.
webcomic. Like I have my readers who are tuning in twice a week to read it. I don't want to just like cut it off. They let me keep doing that. And it was actually there were times where I'd be like midnight the night before, and I'm like drawing this page, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna like change this plot point. I'm just gonna like it said in the script she gets her leg cut off. What if she got her head cut off? And then I would go online, and the next morning I get like a call. It's like, did you just kill your main character? Like, what's going on? I'm like, it's fine, I'm doing a thing.
Right.
But like,
Wait till next week.
yeah, the
Yeah.
like I guess the improvisation of, of making a webcomic where it's just like you figure it out, you're still figuring it out as you go. They really let me have that freedom to do that, which, was awesome. It let me finish the book on my own terms, which was like,
That's rare.
which I needed.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you need that, especially I don't want to say inexperienced, but as unexposed as you were at that point to the whole
Yeah.
industry, in that way. That
Well, and
was
again, also like because I didn't consider myself a writer. I was really only writing it so that I could draw it because I saw myself as an illustrator. So the idea of like finishing a script and having it be like a solid done script and then sending it in and then getting notes on that and then drawing that is not how especially at the time, I wouldn't have it wouldn't have worked. Like, I have to be able to be like, "All right, I wrote this thing. I think this would work better. I'm gonna, like, build off of, the thing in the script when I execute it visually," because the visual part of it is really where the storytelling happens.
right. Right.
And I'm still that way a little bit. When I write, I'm always thinking about what the final visual product is. But I feel like whenever I see it, I'm always like, "Oh, I get now what I should have done with the script." Like, as soon as the visual
Mm,
element falls into place, everything makes sense. The script is really just, for me, the stepping stone
right.
to the final, like, image.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know what I would have done if they'd just been like, "All right, finish the script. We'll, like, workshop the script, and then you'll just draw exactly what's in the script." I wouldn't have worked. Yeah, I don't think I could have done that.
So you get a publishing deal. You are continuing what you're doing. You're still putting it
Mhm.
online. What happened after that?
So I graduated from college that year. And I was like, all right, what do I do now? And I moved out west.
Mm,
So I did an internship out here and for comics.
right.
And I loved it. Like
At
I was just like
Boom?
Boom Studios,
Boom
yeah, yeah.
Studios.
So I was their intern, and I was like, I love it out here. This is the best. It's sunny every day.
Mhm.
You know, there's celebrities at the mall, like
Yeah.
palm trees.
Uh-huh.
I love it. Let's go out west.
Yeah.
Which was, for comics, it was like at the time most of the stuff was in New York, but I was just like, I just have a good feeling about LA.
Hmm.
So I went there, but I really didn't have like any job offers or anything. I just wanted to kind of be here. And I was still working on Nimona. I was still doing my own thing, freelance illustration. And I moved out here, and my book agent, he got me in touch with some film agents to kind of start shopping Nimona as a movie. I
Mm.
was like, all right, cool. Again, never thought any of that was ever gonna happen. I was like, all
Become
right,
reality.
cool, sure, I'll
Mhm.
do the like water bottle tour or whatever. But like, we all know that like you're just messing with me.
Blowing
Um,
smoke.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just like I know it's not really gonna happen. And something unexpected happened out of that, which was that they were like, "Oh, we have these staff writing jobs for animated shows that we think you'd be really great at." And I'm like, "What? I'm not a writer. Like, I don't have any scripts. I just do comics, you
Mhm.
know." But I was just kind of going with it. So I was like, "All right, cool. Yeah, I'll go on these meetings. Like, I'll meet these people. They seem really cool, but I don't think I'm qualified for these
Mm.
jobs." And I ended up meeting some really great people over at Disney for Craig McCracken's show Wander Over Yonder.
Yep.
And they were like, all right, well, we want you as a writer. I was like, okay. I think at
Yeah.
that point I was just going with it. I was
Mhm.
just like, all right, like I'll just play along. But it was the same exact feeling that I'd had before, of just being like, what is happening?
Mhm.
I think there's a mistake.
Mhm. I must
Um,
have the same name as someone else who's, like, a talented
yeah.
TV writer. Yeah.
Don't let them figure it out.
Uh-huh,
Just keep
uh-huh,
playing along. Maybe they'll
uh-huh.
be too embarrassed to tell me and make me leave.
Yeah.
So I started writing for that. And like I was in a writer's room. I had this incredible crew around me. And that was really my first taste of the animation industry.
What was that experience like, having done Nimona and everything by yourself for the
Mhm.
most part, and getting feedback from people, of course, and then feedback once you put it up and everything
Mhm.
each week? But now you're in a writer's room with all these people who do have that experience or
Yeah.
are, on paper qualified for that, and here you are feeling like, "Oh, I don't belong here." What was that experience like? Did you have to just learn a lot, or did you fake it till you made
Yeah,
it?
I mean, I did. I mean, like my first few scripts, they were like probably nonsense.
Mhm.
So it was really having like a really strong story editor and a really strong showrunner who believed in me. And like honestly, I loved it.
Mm.
It had this thing like the collaborative nature of animation. Like, like I told you, I always lived my childhood in stories.
Right.
I kind of was always thinking about them. And there's this idea with my favorite stories with Star Wars or with Lord of the Rings. I'm like, I wanna go there. Does that
Mm.
exist somewhere? Is there some piece of that I can access? And, like, how do I get access to how can I, like, get inside my favorite stories, you
Mm.
know? And
Mm.
so when you're doing your own thing, it's all, you know, the whole story, the characters, everything, it's all with you.
Right.
Um,
Lives with you, yeah.
and so much of, like, telling a good story is, like, tricking people into thinking this world could be real. These characters are out there somewhere. Like maybe there's more information than is in the comic, you know? Like that's so
Mm.
much of like telling a compelling story. Being in animation is like you get to live in that world.
Mm.
You get to live like suddenly there are all these other people around you who are sharing in the world that you're building. You go in there's like the background painter who's like,
Mhm.
I'm creating this alien planet. It's gonna look like this. And you're like, wow, oh my God, that's so cool. And the script, I imagined it like this. You did it like this. It's so cool. Here are the other writers who are like, doing their scripts and that fleshes out the world. Here are the board artists who are, every single person on that production, on every production, they all have a piece of
Mm.
what makes this world real.
Mm.
And that was what I'd wanted, that like kind of living in the story thing.
Right.
And I feel like I got really annoying actually because I would just like kind of follow people around and just be like, "Where are you going? Are you going to
Yeah.
a meeting? Can I come?" Like, like
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
board artist. What are you doing? Can I watch? Like,
Uh-huh.
just kind of like a lot of it was like I wanted to learn, but I also was just like, what's going to happen next
Mm.
in the story? Even though I know because I work on the show,
Right.
but I still want to like see it happen. I wanted to see every single piece of it come together. And they were awesome. They really let me, like, have a lot of freedom and have a lot like, they let me go to a lot of stuff and just really see the process of how this cartoon got made,
Mm.
and, I'm super grateful to them for that because it taught me so much, and it kinda gave me what I wanted, this feeling of just, like, collaborative storytelling.
Yeah.
And so, once I got a taste for that, it was kind of like, um I love doing comics. I love the feeling of making your own thing on your own terms, but I also just, in a different way, just really love that feeling of just a whole group of people coming together to tell one story. It's like,
Mm.
it's like
Collaborating.
theater,
Yeah. Yeah.
where you're living in a fantasy world together a little bit.
Mm.
And it feels kind of real.
We're talking earlier about when you see someone that has true happiness,
Mhm.
right? When you experience that thing, because you said like you sort of thought the trajectory of your career was going a certain way, and then you realize like, ooh, it's a little bit more
Mhm.
nuanced than that. There's a lot more to it. I have a lot more to learn. I'm maybe better at this than I thought, or whatever else. When that finally clicked for you, was it like, okay, this is what I want to do with my life?
The biggest change in my worldview was that I stopped believing in fate, I
Mm.
guess. That I
Mm.
stopped believing that I had a destiny or that I was, like, destined to be something, which is a really big part of, Christianity,
Religious
especially
upbringing. Yeah.
the Protestant.
Mhm.
It is kind of like God has a plan, it's all figured out, and
You
even
just
there
have to
were
stay on that path, is what you're
yeah,
taught.
yeah.
Yeah, just stay
And I
in.
was
Yeah.
terrified growing up because there's the idea that, like, okay, you're either saved or you're not, and you might not know which one you are, but
Mm.
it's already kinda decided for you,
Mm.
So I
Right.
was always terrified that I was, like, one of the bad ones,
Mhm.
the kind of, like,
Mhm.
this is the way I got this tattoo, there's a Bible verse that's like,
Mhm.
"At the
Sheep
end
and
of
the
days,
goats.
the sheep and the goats, God will separate the sheep from the goats," and I was like, "Well, how do you know if you're a goat?
Mhm.
You don't choose to be a goat, you're born a goat."
You get there and you're, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you never have a choice, you can't become a sheep.
Mm.
So it was just like this kind of I think that was really, the biggest, just the biggest conflict for me, like, the biggest source of tension was just, like, I wanna believe that we have a choice, that we have power over our own lives. I don't know if that's true. I still don't fully know if that's true
Mm.
because it's so much more complicated than that. But, I wanna believe that's true. So, l even choosing what my next move was gonna be, how to live my life, so much of it was just like, "All right, let's see what happens." Because it wasn't like, "Okay, here's what I wanna do. I'm gonna work towards this goal." It was more like I had little small goals along the way. A lot of it would be like, "All right, I guess I'm a TV writer now. They're gonna fire me in 6 weeks as soon as they figure out I don't know what I'm doing, but my
Mhm.
goal is at the end of 6 weeks to not get fired, and
Mm.
don't get fired." I'm like, "Okay, cool. I guess I tricked them. So
Right.
let's go another 6 weeks, see how that goes."
Yeah.
And then maybe I have another goal then, and I'm like, "I wanna write this great script. I am really passionate about it. That's gonna be my next goal." And then eventually it wasn't so much like, "This is my trajectory. This is my path. This is what I wanna do." It's like, "Okay, this is cool. Let's keep going. Let's see where this leads." But it was less
Yeah.
of believing that I was like, that I had found the thing I was meant to do. I'm more of just like,
You had to go through a transition
yeah.
first because your mindset
Mhm.
was so set in stone because
Mhm.
of that entire upbringing.
Yeah.
When you started to have those feelings of, "I might be more in control of my own destiny than or my own life," let's just say that, "than you previously thought." Did you meet that realization with fear or a sense of freedom, or a little bit of both?
It was very profound for me. It was a huge change because you live the first 19 years of your life with a second voice in your head. That the transition to not having that voice is not an easy
No.
one. And I think you always sort of distrust yourself because you always believe that you're sort of inherently evil and you're
Mhm.
going to do something bad if left to your own devices. And the voice in your head is judging that. And it knows, even if you just thought about it, it knows that you thought about it.
Yeah.
And that's maybe a clue that you're bad.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
the feeling of just being like, like breaking some of those habits of just being like, "No, like, I am going to sleep in on Sunday. I'm not gonna pray right now." Like, those are the things, like, the little things that are just like, I didn't know I could feel like it was like a
Mm.
lightness, and at first it was an emptiness too, but it was a lightness,
Yeah.
and for me, that was something that was transformative.
Mm.
It did feel like a lot of, like, just, like, being a tiny boat in a big sea of just, like,
Mm.
I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Everything around me, there's infinite
Yeah.
amount of things around me in a way that I never quite appreciated before.
Mm.
Um, but it was also I felt free, and
Yeah.
so that was something that was it made a huge impact on the way that I lived my life and the choices that I made, and, I'm still figuring it out. I will probably be figuring it out forever,
Mhm.
but it was it was kinda nice. It was kinda nice to not know where I was going, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that had always brought me such fear before, but then it was like, "All right, well, let's just keep going," you
Mhm.
know? Might sail
Mhm.
over a waterfall or whatever, but, like, you know?
There's something beautiful in the mystery versus the
Yeah.
idea that
Mhm.
it's already predetermined
Mhm.
or predestined, the language, like,
Yeah.
it's all set in stone already. Your job is to not fuck it up,
Yeah.
right? And to just
Mhm.
stay in
Mhm.
God's will or on
And the
that
thing is that, like,
path or
sometimes
whatever.
it's just, like, no matter how hard you try, you might just still end up,
Mhm.
you may just be born that way,
Mhm.
which is, like, that was yeah.
You might just
Never
be
never
born
cared for that.
born a sheep or born a goat. Wander Over Yonder happens,
Mhm.
and then you realize, "I like this. This
Mhm.
is fun." There's collaboration.
Yeah.
There's still the art matching the writing
Mhm.
that you get to, have that fulfillment. Then do other calls start coming in? Work on this episode of this, work on this episode of this. How did that all sort
Yeah,
of
I mean,
happen?
kinda.
Because you
Like,
ended up writing on
honestly,
a
I
few other.
wanted to stay with Wander forever.
Yeah.
I did not wanna leave. I wouldn't leave, actually. When my writing contract ran out, I was like, "Well, I can paint," and I
Mhm.
painted ga backgrounds for a while after
You
that.
did? Wow.
Yeah, and so I was kind of we were all waiting, we wanted a season 3.
Mm.
We had plans for season 3, and I really wanted to stay and do it, but, it was kind of like I was, my contract ran out, and I wasn't great at painting backgrounds. I did my best, but
Yeah.
but I did end up, leaving the studio, and we didn't get season 3 as it turned out, which
Mhm.
was a huge, huge bummer for me.
And the fans.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I was just kind of like, all right, well, what do I do now? I don't know. Weirdly enough, I wasn't immediately like, I want to go do another, write on another show. Like I liked this show that I
Yeah.
was on and the
Yeah.
people I was with. Like,
And it was your
and
first
it was my
experience,
first
so it had
experience.
that
So I was like, I
yeah.
didn't want the change. So I freelanced for a bit. I did write for some other shows. And then I got the call. This was actually the same year that Nimona came out. So this was a big year. This was
Mhm.
2015.
Yep.
And Lumberjanes came out that year too. It was just like a lot was going on.
Lumberjanes is great,
Yeah.
by the way.
Thanks. Yeah. So I got the call that DreamWorks was looking for someone to develop She-Ra. And, they had the rights to it and they were looking for someone to bring like a new take to it. I was like, sure, why not? Like
Yeah.
I'll try something. It's like what I was saying before, where I'm just like, all right, let me make it past the first
Mhm.
landmark, which is just like, let's get a pitch in place,
One
pitch
step at a
it,
time, yeah.
see if they'll get the pitch. Then, like every step of the way is just again, like every moment I was just like, and then they're gonna find out I don't know what I'm doing and I'm gonna
Mhm.
get fired.
Mhm.
I don't want to be fired, but like there's no way that
They
this goes.
won't find out.
There's such a small chance at that, like that a show even goes, that a showrunner even like gets to stay on. It's just like the odds of that. And I knew it.
And how old are you
I
at this
was
point?
24. So I was, yeah, just dumb enough to believe in myself that I could do a good job.
But also too, that's unprecedented in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big mountain in front of you at that age to
Yeah.
if it did end up going,
Yeah.
right,
And I,
yeah.
I think that was a benefit to me in some ways that I was just kind of like, I tried not to put all of my heart into it right away. I was like, all right, I kind of know that I don't know if this will go. I don't know if I'll stay, if they'll want me to stay. Try not to love it too hard, but I love everything I work on, like
Mm.
so much, like the maximum amount.
They
So,
tell you to hold everything with an open
mhm.
hand because in this business, things can disappear
Yeah,
or
exactly.
or or, manifest themselves like
Hmm.
that. Um, so you don't
Yeah,
you're told not to, but if you really care about your work, it's
yeah,
impossible not to, right? Because
yeah,
that protection and that harnessing of that thing is what makes your art good.
yeah.
So it's that
For
catch
me, it's like
22.
it's what makes it. It's what fuels it.
Mm.
It's like what makes a story good for me is if I'm like buried in it, And, I tried really hard. I tried to not get attached too early, and I remember this actually, this was like, I had pitched the show, or I was gonna pitch the show. It was the day I pitched the show, and I just, like I made this tweet that I think I've deleted since then, but, like, I was just like, "All right, I just did something. It probably won't amount to anything, but I just wanna say it right here, right now, just for this moment that I wanted this,"
Mm. Mm.
Like, and
Mm.
it was, like, the only time that I'd really allow myself to say something like that, like, I want this. I
Yeah.
really, really hope that this happens.
Wow.
And so, like, it did happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I put my whole heart into it. So it was just like whatever distance I was trying to keep, it just that didn't work. So it was like, but it was, it was amazing. Like it was
Yeah.
like,
Could be the fact that you didn't keep too much distance is the reason
yeah.
why it happened.
Yeah.
Because that level of confidence and that level of care for the work oftentimes is what pushes it over the edge.
Yeah.
What I love is that when you got the call, you weren't like, "No," immediately.
Yeah.
It was, "Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see." And
Mhm.
and how long was it between when you got that call and when you went in and pitched it? How much time did you have to sort of figure out what
You
your
know,
take on She-Ra was gonna be?
yeah, that I don't know. That was like it wasn't a long time. It was a few months
Yeah.
maybe. So I was working on the pitch. I was working on, and I was really focusing on the characters and the world building and stuff. I really understood that it was kind of like, okay, let's just try something here. Let's just see. Like if I
Mm,
were to do this, what would my approach be? And
mm,
just you kind of try and just like sell that vision and be like, all right, I'm gonna paint a picture here. You're gonna feel like there's more to this picture that only I can see, and that's why you need me, you know? Like,
Mhm.
that's the whole thing, and so, you make some vision boards,
Yep.
you,
Yep.
like, write some brainstorm documents that's just nonsense,
Uh-huh.
and just try and, like, pretend that there is something big that you're working towards, and it's like,
Mm.
"Stick with me and you'll see it," you know?
Yeah.
And being 24, that was, like, a
Yeah.
total lie in
Of
some ways.
course.
Like, I
Total
had no
bullshit.
idea what
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
doing.
yeah.
But, like, I believed in it, and I still do, and my heart was in there. Whether or
Yeah.
not I tried to do that or not,
Mhm.
like, it was like at a certain point, I was just like, "All right, well, I'm all in.
I'm in the
Let's do
building, I gotta
this."
go.
Yeah, yeah.
How much of it felt like trying to sell the show, the idea of the show,
Mhm.
and trying to sell yourself as the person to be able to bring that vision to life? Do you understand?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because you kinda have to sell yourself at that point because you have
Mhm.
some stuff on
Yeah.
paper, but not enough to, in our minds as writers, really justify going, "I'm gonna be writing this and show running it
Yeah.
and producing and all of that stuff." Because
Yeah.
you feel like you had to really sell yourself to them or just the
Yeah,
show?
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is just it's like, false confidence of just
Mhm.
being like, "No, I absolutely got this. Don't worry about it. I got
I
this.
got
I
this.
got this. Don't
Yeah.
worry. I got it.
Yeah.
I got it."
Don't worry, because
Yeah.
they say that, everybody always talks about, "Oh, well, then the executives wanna get involved, and they wanna do the"
Mm.
and then there's people who say, "If you show fear, people wanna come in and try and take control over a
Mhm.
project or a
Yeah.
film or a show or whatever,
Mhm.
if they sense that you're afraid. If you project, 'I've got this.
Mhm.
I don't have it all figured out, but I'm going to,'
Yeah.
they'll leave you alone."
Yeah.
Was that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were kinda tied together.
Yeah.
Like, it's like the selling of the vision and the selling of myself, they were connected, and I probably had been, like, preparing for that my whole life, the same as just, like, being in church and just, like, imagining whatever
Mhm.
story, like, it's the same thing. You're like, I've met these characters, maybe they're
Mm.
my friends, like, I'll introduce them to you. I'll introduce the world to you, but, like, this is real.
Yeah.
And, like, it's sort of selling that, like I think what's beautiful about a collaborative environment like that is that, like, there are so many chances for things to grow organically and for things to surprise me
Mm.
and be like, "I didn't think that was gonna happen," and it did, and it's amazing. But a lot of it is also seeing whatever light is on the horizon or pretending that you do and saying, "That's where we're going."
Mm.
So just,
Mm.
like, within that, let's play, let's figure stuff out, let's explore, but, like, this is the direction we're going. And so, not just for executives, but for your crew, for
Right.
yourself, for the
Right.
story, you have to sort of pick a point and head towards that. So it's something that it's a fine line to walk because you can't be too stubborn about it either. You can't just be like, "No, we're doing things this way and only this way."
Mhm.
Like, you have to incorporate the opinions of everyone around you, and that makes it better, that makes it stronger, that makes it grow and feel like something that's alive. But that can get out of control, that can
Yes.
become unwieldy if you're not always just like, "Let's do all of this, and let's
Mhm.
keep going this direction." And that's a
Yeah.
lot of what it is. It's just like, everyone's like, "Maybe this, maybe that," and you're like, "Let's do this." And then
Mhm.
you stick with it. And you stick with it, and if it turns out you're wrong, you're like, "Ah, whoops, sorry about that." But, like, at least we figured out that that wasn't the right thing. Because
Right.
sometimes the weight of the fear of the just unknown, that can really stop you in your tracks.
Somebody's gotta make the call.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. For people who may not know, or for fans of the show or whatever that see your name in the credits, um, explain what a showrunner does for something like She-Ra. What was basically, like, your responsibilities?
So being a showrunner involves you weigh in on every single stage of the show. So I
Every step of the
oversee
process, right? Yeah.
the scripts
Mhm.
directly. I wrote a good portion of the first season, oversee every, like, from scripts to the boarding process, where the scripts are drawn in order to animate them, to design, where we design around what's on the boards, and then we ship it to our overseas studio, the production aspect of that, and
Mm.
then they animate it, and then it comes back, and then we do post. There's so many things,
Casting.
casting,
Yeah.
records, just
Mhm.
like every single step and every single little thing. Like, there are things where you're like, you sit in a room and you listen back to every single little grunt
Mhm.
or sigh that a character does, and you
Mhm.
choose the right one.
Mhm.
And it's like, at first you're like, wow, I just thought it just happened. That seems so spontaneous. And you're like, all right, I'm sifting through just like, ah. And like, this
Uh-huh.
is weirdly just a super important part of the
Yeah.
process. It
Yeah.
has to be right. Um, so yeah, it's everything. All the little pieces that you don't even know are there. Uh, you have to make a decision on at some
Mhm.
point or another.
Mhm.
So that's basically what I do.
Was there any weird expectations that you felt or pressure because that is such a beloved character by
Yeah.
so many people? So
Mhm.
anytime you're picking up a something that was already a franchise or something that's already a
Mhm.
well-known thing and you're running with your own version of it or your own vision or a collaborative group
Yeah.
of people's vision of it, there's got to be that weird pressure, right? And that sense of expectation. How did you manage that? Did you ignore it and go, we're doing something totally different? Or how did you deal with it?
I basically treated it as someone has handed me a box of toys,
Hmm.
and it's my moment to kind of take these toys out and make something amazing with them.
Hmm.
But like, you've been handed a box full of really cool toys. So you want to take advantage of just like how interesting everything is within that box, but you also are kind of treating it as raw material in
Hmm.
some ways. So instead of just being like, all right, I have to fit it within this framework, I have to appeal to this audience, it's like, again, it's just kind of like, let's see what happens. It was exactly, it felt the same as what I was doing with my like Star Wars action figures when I was a kid, where it's like, you know, I've decided that Han Solo is now like a steamboat captain or something. Or it's, I
Yeah,
mean, nothing
yeah.
like that. Like it's just
That would have
like
been cool.
you're picking up these characters, you're deciding who they are, how they interact with each other, what the world is around them. And I honestly just I wanted to use everything. I wanted to
Mm,
like there's so little about this show that doesn't have its roots in
mhm.
something from the original franchise.
Right,
All the character names, everything, even Kyle, like that
right.
was like Bo's original name, like in the original show, like
Yeah.
secretly. And I was like, there's a guy in this world named Kyle. Like fuck that guy. Like I'm gonna like
Yeah,
make a character named Kyle who's just like, why is he here? Um,
yeah.
but it was it's like trying to explore and deepen and just being like, here are these characters, they're each other's nemesis. What's the story behind that? How
Mm,
can we figure out how to like flesh that out and like make those emotions feel real and new and different from the original, but also that it feels like the natural next step from
yeah.
the original. And I tried intentionally not to think too much about the people who had a strong attachment to it, a nostalgic attachment to it. Again, a lot of it was just kind of like, let's see where this goes. I think that it's gonna be really good, but I always sort of knew that it would be like, there were gonna be a lot of people who had a nostalgic attachment to it who were gonna be resistant.
Mhm.
And that is just it makes complete sense. Like
It's
we
like
all
that
do
with
it.
anything,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, we all do it.
Yeah.
It happens pretty constantly now because there are so many things getting reimagined, rebooted.
Mhm.
And so that was sort of something I knew was going to be a factor at some point, but because I was just like, let's see how far this goes before I get fired.
Yeah,
I tried not to think about it. I really
yeah.
didn't think much about it. It was kind of this thing hanging over me. I was like, at some point you'll have to deal with this, but
Mm,
I uh I tried to make sure that the production operated outside of that fear,
right.
because it needed to be its own thing. And the second you start getting afraid of how people will respond, how what the discourse is going to be around it, that's when the story stops being genuine.
It's you're seized,
So
you're seized.
it was very daunting for sure, but it was also exciting. It's a super super cool box of toys to inherit,
Yes,
and
yes.
I yeah feel very honored that I got the chance to play with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I feel like as writers we struggle with the most is the page to screen changes that sometimes happen because someone says, "Oh, this should happen." Sometimes it happens because it needs to happen for the
Mhm.
story to be better. Sometimes you just can't pull off what you
Mhm.
write and it has to change. How do you do with those changes?
Mhm.
Because for a lot of people it's very, contemptuous. It's I I don't want it to change. I'm
Yeah.
so precious about this. You're also someone who is so collaborative and that
Yeah.
your process is so it's elevated by the people that you surround yourself with. And so was
Absolutely.
it easy for you to go, okay, I know things have to change, being okay with those changes?
Yeah, I mean, again, and I think that this is a benefit of my background as well, where the script was never the final destination for me. You can write a great script that reads amazing, and the people who are reading it wipe tears away while they're
Mm,
reading it. If you can't draw it and you're making a cartoon, it's not a good script.
yeah,
So that's
those are
something
very,
that's
yeah.
like, I always consider the final version of it is what you finally see on your TV. But every step of the process, it's like, and I have some big ideas sometimes, like there are some things that are like, all right, there's gonna be this like laser tag style augmented reality training course with pillars that rise up out of the ground, and the pillars represent trees, but they also blow them up to form bridges and they swing around them, and like it's gonna be like like and I'm like writing this. I'm like, this is so cool. And then it's like, oh, all right, well, how are we gonna execute that? How are we
Mhm,
gonna make that real? So
mhm.
that's like it's something that it's like right from the start. You just have to be like, okay, well, this is my original idea. Um, let's give it to the designer and see how we can actually execute this. And then like, oh, it comes back like this. Like that's cool.
Mhm.
Let's try it like that instead. And then the board artist takes it and they find something else out about it. Like maybe it doesn't. I don't think that like the thing that I'm trying to find that image in my head that's perfect, it's not real. It's not real until everyone else has made it real.
Wow, yeah.
And so I think that it just approaching it that way, I think that the second as a writer you start, unless you're making a novel or making something where the writing is the final
Mhm.
destination, um, you have to be ready for it to change, for it to be shaped by the people who are executing it because they are the storytellers and they are the vehicles of that story as much as the writer is. The writer sort of goes first and creates the foundation and the groundwork, and they set up the ideas, and those might change. But it's really everyone who builds upon that. The ultimate goal is not to have an amazing script or to have an amazing board. It's to have an amazing episode.
Finished product,
And
yeah.
so it's really embracing that aspect of it and embracing the collaboration and embracing the changes that everyone else will bring to it.
Mm,
So, there are times I think it's you choose when you say like, "Okay, I really had this image in the script. It's not coming through. We need to revisit this and figure out how to at least pay off this thing that's in the script." Like sometimes you have to do something like that.
yeah.
But a lot of time it's also like there are moments where I thought I knew things about certain characters, and then you go and you record them and you get a voice actor in, and they read a line in a way that you just never expected.
Mm,
And it changes the whole character in your mind.
mm,
And you're just like, wait a second, I definitely thought this character felt this thing at this time in this way. And then someone comes who has like, you know, an insight into this character that maybe you don't have. And they reveal that to you. And then you're like, wait a second, you're right. The
mhm.
character totally feels that way.
Right.
Let's do that instead.
Yeah.
That's the magic of
That's
it. Like,
fun.
that's like where it starts to feel like
Yeah.
something that's alive and something that's growing and something that's being kind of nurtured by a whole group of people, like a sphere of people. I love it.
All the homeschool
Yeah.
kids are weighing in on what the Odyssey should turn
Yeah.
into. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the best feeling. That's the biggest gig you landed so far. What was your biggest fear? It not getting picked up, you getting fired from it, you failing,
I think at
you're in that.
first my biggest fear was failing,
Mm,
was like, not executing the thing I wanted to execute, was like washing out,
mm,
getting kind of like hobbled in my creativity. Like those are the things that like especially coming from a world where I um was solely devoted to creating my own projects, and I was very fortunate to be able to do that. Those are my fears coming in. I did not yet realize what would be required of me as a leader
mm.
and as a manager. And so I think the biggest change in that fear became that suddenly that I was going to let down people who relied on me.
Wow.
There are just so many people involved with making something like this. Like it's a miracle that any animated show has ever been made.
Mhm.
It's a
Mhm,
miracle.
mhm.
It can't happen. I don't know why it does.
Yeah.
And every time it does, it's just like bravo.
It's a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it's something where there's so many people involved, and there's so many people who are, like, especially as a showrunner, they're looking to you, and, the standard that you set is gonna affect people's quality of life, their
Mm.
work, y and the quality of the story as well. If people feel comfortable bringing their ideas to the table and embellishing, if they're having fun at their job, it shows. It's obviously a lot of work, it will always be a lot of work, but, like, if people are miserable, it's not sustainable,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's not okay,
It's not
you know?
fun. Yeah, you're not
It's like,
yeah.
why are we doing this
Right.
if we're making something together. It's like,
Mm.
I don't know that I expected that responsibility from the start, and it was kind of the biggest learning curve for me to be like, "Okay, well, how do I become a leader? How do I become the best leader? How do I become the leader that this crew of people deserves?" Which is kinda weirdly what the show ended up being about, you know? It
Yeah.
became about, leadership.
Reluctant
Like, yeah,
leadership
and people ask me
almost,
all the
yeah.
time, they're like, "Oh, She-Ra is like, they did all these sexist things where, like, oh, He-Man gets to just be about power and strength, and then She-Ra's for the honor. She has healing. She talks to animals." Like, it's why can't she just be, like, strong and tough and like He-Man and have the power? And it's like, well, she does have the power.
Mm.
When, we meet the character, she just punches everything, and that's how
Mhm.
she deals with all her problems, and then suddenly she's like, "Oh, wait. I have to be a leader. I have to bring people together. I have to heal. I have to start like a positive discussion." Like all the things that are like, yeah, it's not as easy as
Yeah.
just being like, I'm strong, I have the
Mhm.
power. And it's like, this is a different kind of strength. This is important.
Yeah.
There is strength and there is power in being a good listener and being a strong and calm presence in being a mediator,
Mm.
in bringing people together. Like those are the things that it is like, it's a bit cheesy maybe, but it is, I think that's what makes you strong. It's not just, barreling through.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so that realization sort of made it into the show. It's sort of the journey that the characters are going on too,
Yeah.
um, where they're figuring out what strength means for them. And they all kind of come to their own conclusions, but, um, ultimately, I think the show kind of ended up being about the process of making the show.
That's what I love is that those parallels to your
Mhm.
journey and the
Yeah.
journey of the show
Yeah.
and the journey that all of you were on trying to make that thing not just a
Yeah.
reality, but make it fucking good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the show is about collaboration, and it's about, like, none of us can do it on our own. You have to team up.
Mhm.
You have to work well together.
Mhm.
And, yeah, so that's what ended up being kind of the
Yeah.
core of the show.
Do you I get a different answer to this from every writer or artist that I talk to. So I'm interested in your take. Do you read reviews of your work?
It depends. Like, the first day something comes out, I, like, there's all of the hype, and it's hard to tear myself away from the internet on that
Mhm.
first day.
Mhm. So are you interested in what the industry has to say about it and what the critics have to say? Are you more interested in, like, what the people, the boots on the ground have to say about it? Where do you fit in that? Is it, "I can't look at any of it because 'cause it'll taint my idea of what I'm trying to
Yeah.
do?" Where do you fit in there?
No, I definitely look. There's certain things that are just like, and it's a trial and error sometimes where it's like, okay, I I can't read things like this because
Mm,
it's gonna distract me, or it's gonna kind of like gonna make me feel bad without really any payoff.
mm,
I do believe in feedback and criticism. I think criticism is very important. And I think it's very important to kind of have the skill where you can seek criticism, assess it, determine what is helpful and useful for you to take forward and what is not.
mm,
And that honestly, I don't really view them as separate. I think that the way, like, viewing the internet as a whole, and the industry, it's like obviously a YouTube comment is not gonna like keep me up at night.
right.
But at the same time, it is like when it's like, all right, someone has this concern, whether they're a critic or a fan, even if you try to remove yourself from that situation, you will find yourself in a place where you are confronted with that at some
Mhm,
point.
mhm,
And I think for me, the skill, which has been difficult to cultivate, but I think is very important, is figuring out what about it is useful. There's always a reason
Yes.
behind what someone's saying, even if it's not useful to you at all.
Mhm.
I think that's the difference, whether it's useful or not.
Mm.
When someone says, "I think you could change them this way. I think it would be better like this," and you're like, "That's not what I'm going for. Thank you for weighing in. It was never my intention to make something like what you want to be seeing. I don't think that this thing is for you,
Mm.
but I have the ability to view your criticism and determine that it's not actually going to be helpful to me."
Mm.
Whereas if someone I'm like, is like, "I was hurt by this thing," or "I really wanted to see this thing inside," and you're like, "All right, well, there's only so much I can do. I can't give you the exact thing that you want right now, but like it does mean something to me to
Mm.
hear from someone that like, there's a certain amount that feedback I think can be useful is what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
Very important to keep a distance from it,
You have to have a
and to
healthy
not
relationship to it.
like chase it too much and
Mm.
to not let it determine your self-worth for sure.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that there are times and it's how we grow and it's how we kind of like becoming an artist on the internet. There will be people who bring up criticisms from time to time, and sometimes those will hit home. And sometimes you realize that you have made a mistake or that you have sort of taken the wrong approach to something. And figuring out when that is applicable and being like, you know what, you're right, I'll do better next time.
Mm.
I think that's very important to any artist's growth and career because everyone has to continue assessing who they are, what they're making, and who they want to be
Mm.
constantly, I think, as we go forward. Um,
Or you just stay in the same place forever.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it might be something where the world changes around you, and what once was like received very well is suddenly not going over as well, which I think we're seeing a lot of these days because the world is changing so in such specific ways. And it's like, well, what do you do when people are like suddenly the things that used to get a huge positive reaction are, no longer getting that
Mhm.
reaction? And I think it's just assessing as you go forward and like staying true to yourself, but also listening.
Mm.
And it just is really about your own filters. And um, I do choose to keep a pretty good distance uh, from feedback like that. Like I don't seek out negative opinions.
Mhm.
I don't seek out toxic kind of feedback loops, anything like that. But while trying to stay above it, you also consistently assess.
Yes.
So that's a roundabout way of just I don't
No, I
know.
totally understand.
You weigh it and you figure out what is actually going to help you improve as a creator and as a person, and what can you kind of like set aside and just be like, we will never see eye to eye on this thing, and that is okay. This might not be for you, you
Mm.
know.
Yeah. So we touched on this earlier, but I know it's something super important to you and super important to a lot of people out there. So I want to know about your journey of coming out as gay. So tell me, obviously you have this religious
Yeah.
upbringing, you go to college, you meet these happy people who are okay with that lifestyle and just being who they are, and you're seeing a different perspective of
Yeah.
that than maybe what you were told that was going to be like. When in all this did you start to go, oh, something's happening here?
Yeah, I feel like my path is it's certainly not like a tidy one by any means because I don't know that there are some people and I always sort of was jealous of these people who just they seem like they always kind of knew who they were. Like
Mm.
they had this deep inner pull towards what the people that they loved, the truth that they could see. Like that's like I always wanted that, you
Mm.
know. But for me it was never so clear. So growing up, I don't think I ever really had a lot of fear or not in any way that was plain to me that I don't think I was ever afraid that I was gay,
Mm.
you know? I don't think I didn't have the stuff that like there were little things that I can kind of see now where I look back and I'm like, "Wow, you were really into that older girl that you really was like you really wanted her approval and you just followed her around all the time and when she
Mm.
looked at you it made you feel warm." But like,
Mm.
like it was like at the time I had no idea what that was and I didn't think of it that way.
Mm.
I think especially for my parents, this is hard for them to understand because I was kind of boy crazy, honestly, as a kid.
Yeah.
I was really into the boys. I was like really into like what they thought about me and like getting them to like me and like who likes who. That was like so fun. That
Mm.
was like, "Oh, he's over there. He looked at me 3 times." Like, that's like it's like the most fun you can
It's
have
a
as like a
game.
13-year-old.
It's a
Yeah.
game, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was like this thing that it was just always like, it only goes so far, you know? Like, in my head, there wasn't a vision of what that meant of having a boyfriend, having a husband, having a family, being a straight person with a husband. Didn't really think that far ahead.
Hmm.
So it took me a very, very long time, even through times when I really should have known.
Wow.
And so that's kind of the hard part about talking about it is that it's like I just feel like I should have known. I feel like I should have figured it out sooner.
Hmm.
And I
What stopped you, do you think?
I'm not really sure.
Hmm.
I'm hoping that I gain more clarity on this, the longer I live. But it's I mostly had girlfriends. Like I
Mhm.
had female friends who I did everything with. Didn't have a lot of guy friends. I had really short hair as a teen. I basically buzzed my head a lot, which already had people talking about me.
Right.
But, it was like water off my back because I was like, "Well, I'm not gay, so whatever."
Yeah.
It took a really long time to put it together. I Into my adult years, it's actually been fairly recent that I've been out, that I am publicly, and I'm with another woman. We're engaged.
Mhm.
We're together.
Congratulations,
Thank
by the way.
you.
I'm
We're
so
shaking That's what
excited.
we're
I'm
doing.
so excited. Let me see.
I
Let me see. Let me see.
Yeah,
I saw this
see?
online, but it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, but it's strange to think that even just 3 years ago,
Mm.
this wasn't this wasn't a public part of who I was.
Mm.
It was a very long journey, and it was something that it was just I think that it's just, you start out and you have these certain words. You're like, "Oh, look at that guy over there. Like he's so strong. Like he's got like." I heard someone describe it as this once. You see a guy that you like, you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna climb him like a tree,"
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
when you like a girl, what do you can't climb her like a tree, can you? Like that's like it's like a little different. Like it's like it doesn't quite
Mhm.
all add up.
Mhm.
So like what does it even mean?
Right.
How do you even picture yourself with another woman when all you've ever known is this whole set of things about what attraction is,
Mm.
and it only means this thing? Um, it's really, really hard to sort through that in your own head. It's just all completely alien.
Mm.
And I think that it took me just a very long time, through various relationships, honestly, before there was this turning point where I could never envision myself being with another woman. And then I was in my early 20s and I had a dream.
Mhm.
I had like a dream girlfriend who was no one I've ever met before. She was like really like butch and blonde, like did roller derby. And I was like, "Oh, I love this girl." I don't know her. I've never
Mhm.
met her. But like in my head, I was like, "This is my girlfriend." And then I woke up and I was like, "Wait, shit. Hang on."
Yeah.
I think I can visualize it now. Like I have this idea. It's like something's changed. Something
Mm.
has fallen into place.
Mm.
I wish I had more specifics to it than that because so much of it is just your kind of like brain puzzle pieces fitting themselves together. And suddenly it just makes sense.
Mm.
And suddenly there's no going back.
Mm.
And and I think that even until, my fiance, Molly, you know, I think it wasn't even until we were together and I realized how much I loved her and
Mm.
how I wanted this future together. Um, that was the first time I could ever really visualize myself in that role at all. I
Wow.
think growing up, like there was like, I never wanted a wedding. I never wanted to get married. Like I would be like, "Oh, I guess I'll wear a dress, whatever, go to the church, whatever." It seems kind of boring. It seems kind of like hard.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I was like, wait, no, I actually do want this with this person. Like that was when things fell into place. That was when things changed.
Mm.
So it's not I wish I'd had that piece of me that was like a little bit louder from the start, but I think it's important to know also that like it takes you some time sometimes. Sometimes you have to try a few different things before you really know. And sometimes, like, when I think back and I'm like, "Here are the guys that I liked," and I'm like, "I don't think that was fake. I don't think I was faking it,"
Right,
you
right,
know?
yeah.
That was real. It was important. Um, but ultimately, that was not who I am.
Mhm.
Um, and as soon as I reached a certain point in those relationships, I would realize it.
Mm.
So it really hasn't been until sort of realizing that, like, oh, there's this whole other thing that you never really let yourself think about. You can never really picture it. You can never really imagine it. And suddenly you have it. And it's just like, oh, that's how that feels.
Mm.
I think I get it now,
Yes, yeah.
instead of just being the
On the
lines
job
that
training
people
again.
feed you,
Yeah.
of just being like, yeah, when you like a guy, you want to climb him like a tree. That's what
Mhm.
you like. And you're like,
Mhm.
all right, I guess I do. And then you figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah.
What about wear her like a set of sweatpants?
Mm. You want to load your furniture into her U-Haul. You want to put her on like a flannel shirt.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
You want to open a ceramic studio together.
What is ceramic studio? Yeah, they don't exactly roll off the tongue as well, but
Yeah, you want to
most.
go to the Subaru dealership together.
Mhm, mhm. Uh, that moment of getting engaged and going, because that's a next
Yeah.
it's not just a next step in a commitment of the relationship, it's a next step in the commitment of that idea for you
Mhm.
that this is my identity.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? Because we love Molly, we've met her,
Mhm. Yeah.
she's been on the
She's
show, and
amazing. Yeah.
she's I mean, super talented in
Yeah.
her own life and career, but as a person, who radiates more just like joy? She's got a very interesting sense of humor, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, so what
Yeah.
was that moment like?
I just like I met Molly and I had met her several years before we ever started going out. We actually came up together in
Mm,
comics.
mm,
She had a web comic at the same time as I did. And we met at this convention and I just instantly like I latched onto her in some
mm,
way. I was just like there was something about her face, about her aura, about who she was that I was just like, why don't you come with me? Why don't you, we could hang out. Um and it took us a while for both of us in our own separate ways to kind of find each other
mm,
as romantic partners. It was not an easy path for either of us, but once we were together, like really together, it was like I think I told her I wanted to marry her within like 3 months of us dating, and I was like, we'd been out to dinner. I was like drunk, and I was just like, I want to marry you,
mm, mm.
and it just felt right, even though
What
it
was
was
the
like,
response? What was the
she's
response
like,
at the
"Okay."
end? She's like,
Yeah.
"Alright." Yeah.
It felt right. It didn't feel,
Mm,
like, forward. It felt
mm,
like, it felt yeah, like, something here just works, something here fits, something when I think of my future, I can picture this in a way I never could before,
mm.
and there was just something that, like, everything kinda changed. I never thought I always thought I was, like, really cool, like a stud, or I was like, you know, I like being by myself. I like being single, like, I can't be tamed, whatever I thought of myself as
Mhm.
stupid.
Right.
But,
Yeah, I know that
and
feeling.
then you sort of are like, "Wait a second. Here's this person who kinda makes me wanna drop everything."
Mhm.
And it's like the stuff that you do to be cool when you meet someone that you like, and you're like, "Yeah, I woulda hang out if I got this party because 'cause I'm really cool and, like, a
Mhm.
lot of people like me."
Super
And then instead
popular.
I'm like, "Well, what are you doing?
Mhm.
Like, I just wanna talk to you.
Mhm.
Like, can we just drop all of that and just, like, be with each other?"
Mm.
That's the thing where it's just, like, everything else falls away and you're just, like you become a little bit of a dork,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
you're
yeah,
just,
yeah.
like, you feel kinda dumb. You're like a little puppy where
Can't
you're
stop
just like
talking about her to your
yeah,
friends. Everybody's
yeah,
sick of hearing about
yeah.
whoever Molly is.
And it's
You
scary
know,
too.
like,
It's
yeah.
scary because it's just like if something happens, it's just like
Mm.
you're just an open
You've put yourself out
heart,
there. Mm.
Anything is just like and like it did. Like there was some heartbreak there at
Mm.
first, and then it was worth it,
Mm.
So yeah, oh god, I'm being so mushy right
No, I
now,
love
but
it.
it's
It's true,
nothing I
though.
ever thought that I never thought this would be me. Like the amount of like it's like my life is expanded where I'm just like, I want these things in a way that I never thought I would. And
Mm.
it's just everything has just gotten bigger. It's like
Yeah, you think, "Oh, this isn't really my personality," or, like a wedding, a dress, a church, all that
yeah.
stuff, but then when you meet somebody,
Mhm.
all of a sudden those things that you might have been closed off to before open up
Mhm.
because it's hard to imagine them unless you
Yeah.
that lock has been opened inside of you, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What was the reaction like back home? Because, like we talked about so much, the religious
Yeah.
upbringing,
Yeah.
it's small town in the South with the swamp,
Yeah.
church, all that stuff.
Yeah.
What was that process like for you?
Yeah, it was interesting because I thought I'd come out to my parents. I apparently did not.
I
So
swear,
I,
Thanksgiving 2 years ago, I thought we had
it was literally Thanksgiving,
it
okay?
was.
So, like, my parents came to visit me, and I was like, "Alright, I have this thing to tell them." I had started dating girls, I wasn't with Molly yet, but I had started dating girls, so it was still kind of this hypothetical thing for me.
Hmm,
Hadn't found anyone that I really liked enough to be like, "Hey, meet
right.
my person."
Yeah.
But I wanted to tell them. So the way that I chose to do that was by being like, well, I've dated girls. I'm not putting a label on it yet, but
Mhm.
I have dated girls. I am dating girls. Um and I think they kind of read that. I don't know what they read it as, but I think they were like, "Oh, it's a phase," or like, "Oh, she feels ashamed for doing this."
Mm.
So that was kind of how they're like, "Oh, well, you don't have to worry about us. Like, we love you no matter what," which is great to hear.
Yeah.
But it was also like I think there was a little bit of a miscommunication there where they weren't actually I hadn't said exactly what I meant, and they didn't hear what I meant, which was that
Mm.
I will only date girls from now on.
Mhm. It's not an
Um,
experiment.
yeah,
It's
no,
not a
this isn't
phase.
something that I'm ashamed of. This isn't something that I'm doing as a weird fun thing or a wacky whatever. Like this is me.
Hmm.
And I think that was where we missed each other a little bit. So, it wasn't actually until I'd started dating Molly and I was really into her. I was just so excited that I was with her. I just didn't want to do anything but talk to her all day on the phone, on Skype, whatever.
Mhm.
And so I went home for the holidays and I was just so giddy about it that I was just like, well, I have a girlfriend, like a real
Mhm.
girlfriend. And I was met with silence. And that was when I realized that I maybe hadn't been totally clear
That you
from the
had missed
start
each
about what
other.
was going on with me.
Mm.
Um, and it was just sort of it was like it took them some time, I think, to get used to the idea. Um, and there was some fear, not just from me, but from my family about other members of my family and how they would respond.
Mm.
And so that was something I had to think about like when I was going to sort of break the news to other members of my family. And there were people like my siblings, I came out to them kind of one by one. My little brother, I sort of I guess I thought I'd come out to him and then I sort of mentioned it in front of him at some point and he was just like, "Oh." I was like, "Oh, sorry, did I not tell you?" And he's like, "Well, I guess I figured." And then we just went back to
Yeah.
whatever we were doing. Like it was just
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
lot of my siblings, like they had figured it out. They
Mm.
knew.
Yeah.
They weren't terribly surprised. And they were very, even my siblings who were still, religious, still very conservative, they were like, obviously you're the same person to us. We love you. You're as much a part of the family as you were before. And that was
Mm.
like, it's important to hear, even if it's the kind of basics of just like, yeah, you're still our sister,
Right.
daughter. You're still you. We still love you. It's basic things that are just really powerful to hear.
Mm.
Um,
That you really need.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I
It's
mean, life can
just,
go on without that, and you
yeah,
can be resilient and grow, but
yeah.
it's so much
And
more
I think
helpful
it's
when you have
important,
that.
I think, is just to also set your own terms, especially like having a family that doesn't accept you for who you are, you know, the trade-off for that is that they don't get to have you in their
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
So you say, "Here's who I am. You can love me for who I am, or you don't get to have this
Or you
relationship
miss
with
out.
me.
Yeah.
I am going to be true to myself. I'm going to do what makes me happy. I hope you can be a part of that. I really want you to be a part of it. If you're not, that's it,
I have to do this thing,
So
yeah.
I think it's important to draw those boundaries because it's important for a lot of people who are relatives of gay family members
Mhm.
who might not be ready to accept that yet to also realize the stakes of like, are you going to cut this person off or are you going to try to, understand
Mm.
and grow? And I've been very fortunate to have a family who, you know, I uh, I try to be very gentle with them. And try to like, get to a place where they're comfortable, but also, it's not all about
Be you at the same
yeah,
time.
it's not all
Yeah.
about comfort. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes it will be uncomfortable, and that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that something interesting has happened since then where I took Molly home for the first time for Christmas 2 years ago, and we went to, this annual Christmas Eve party that my dad's side of the family has. He has a really big family in kind of the upstate of South Carolina, kind of the hills area. And I was really nervous to introduce Molly to my extended family. And I have a cousin who I had known, was gay, but he brought his husband that year as well, and we weren't the only gay
You're
couple
like a
at this
buffer.
family,
Yeah.
and it's like to see his mother just being like, like, "I love
Mm-hmm.
like, this is my" like, like, talking about them so excitedly and just, like, what I thought was gonna happen, this, like, discomfort, this awkwardness, this stilted silence, and it was just, like, seeing
Mm.
acceptance,
Mm. You're not
like and
alone.
I had known that he had come out and that it had been a little bit of a journey, um, but the family had totally accepted him no, I don't know how long it took, but, like, they
Mm.
did, and it was like being there was just, like, knowing I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's the opposite of the narrative of the time that's just like, the right will just get farther to the right, the left will get
Mm-hmm.
farther to the left, we'll never meet in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and just realizing that it's like it's family, that people do go to great lengths for family, and that
Mm.
can lead to a lot of understanding and growth.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I've been lucky in that way, for sure. Not
Yeah.
everyone has that, but I've
That's
been very
true.
lucky. There's still a long ways to go, but, I think we'll get there,
Mm-hmm.
so.
I want to talk about the year-end post that you made. Um, you've done one the last 4 years or so, you
7
said?
years,
7
actually.
years. My God. Okay.
I've been doing them since 2011, so
They are a fascinating read for anybody out there who I appreciate the level of honesty. I love the cartoons. I appreciate the level of honesty and the fact that you're you have an understanding because you make art and you see how that art resonates with people, whether it's I love this, it's fun, or this really touches me, or I identify with this character or these people or whatever else. You you love that. And I can tell in the writing of these that you go, if I put myself out there, if I'm vulnerable to a certain extent, I am risking that thing that we all do when we put ourselves into our art or we speak truth about, where we're currently at, like you're doing with these
yeah.
year-end posts, but knowing that it could affect someone in a positive way.
Mhm.
You said something in there that I really, really, really resonated with, which was fearing going on any sort of medication for any mental stuff that you had going on. My wiring's all crossed. It has been like since the day I came into the
Yeah.
world. And fearing that that would kill your creativity
Mhm.
because there's a stigma around that. And it's
Yeah.
talked about in this town
Yeah.
all the time. There's two sides of the spectrum. And we joked about this earlier. I work with some people, not here, but I work with some people who drink all day
Mhm.
because to them, that unlocks the creativity. And they
Yeah.
think the only way for me to be creative is for me to drink.
Yeah.
I, when I try to write when I'm drunk, it's all dog shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, the other side of that is I can't take any medication to
Yeah.
help balance my life to a healthy level because it'll take away my creativity. I would rather live with these demons and live with mental illness or whatever it is, stuff that's a little shifted in my brain, than not be able to create because the medication has muted me.
Yeah.
And you were very honest about going, I was afraid of that. And here I am. I have medication. I still write. I still
Yeah.
create. That thing that was my biggest fear isn't anymore. Talk to me about that because that really hit me profoundly.
Yeah. I think it's been such an interesting time and an interesting journey. I have some piece of me that has always been there, and it's something that feels like it's gonna completely destroy me sometimes.
Hmm.
And sometimes it feels like, well, the only thing I can do is just write, the only thing I can do is just draw, the only thing I can do is create. Um, Nimona's kind of about that.
Interesting, yeah.
So there's the protagonist, she's a shapeshifter. She can be anything she wants to be. So she's able to express things that most people can't because she can literally turn herself into that. And there are times when she turns into this demon of fire and magma that's just her pure rage. And she just wants to tear things apart until someone hears her.
Hmm.
And that was how I felt.
Mm.
And so knowing that I couldn't actually destroy things on a huge scale like she did, nor did I want to.
Right.
It was like, all right, well, how do you express those feelings in a way that is positive? And so a lot of times it did go back into my art. And that was, an important way of dealing with these feelings that at times were so strong. It also wasn't enough. It wasn't, it's just like, it can be so all consuming. It can be so like you lose your, I describe it sometimes as like a pen on a map where you sort of are like, here's where I plant my pen. This is reality.
Mm.
I know I can see everything. I know whether to go left or right. I know because this is where real things are. You move that pen and you can't make the right decision because you can't see the right decision because you're lost. It means that like certain things that don't make any sense start to make sense. And acting in ways that you would never normally do or you wouldn't want to do, they make sense because you've lost sight
Right.
of where you're supposed to be going. And so that is what medication has helped me with, because when you feel so strongly and you're hit with so many feelings, sometimes it can feel like you're just totally surrounded by them. You lose sight. You don't know which way's up. And then suddenly you have something that's like, wait, it's not that I'm not feeling these things. I still feel shitty. They suck. I feel terrible. But I know where I am. I know that I might feel this feeling that's so strong and so it's painful. But I also know it's not real.
It's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are certain feelings like paranoia, like rage, that you get them and you're like, no, I'm not doing this because I can see you. I can see what you are, put you there, and figure it out, you know, which sometimes you don't always have the ability to do. So I think that was the journey. And I was going to therapy. Like I was like voicing these things and I was trying to figure it out. And my therapist never really seemed to think that there was anything wrong. So I was like, I guess nothing's wrong. And it wasn't until kind of I hit this wall and I just realized that I was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing this. I'm like, I'm not sleeping. I'm this ball of nerves. I'm just like this raw wound in so many ways. I am not going to survive this unless something happens. And so that was when, I was like, give me a recommendation for a psychiatrist. And that was when, and it was like, what the nice thing about it is I was like, oh, you know what? Here's the problem. Why don't you try this? And it's not always that easy, but it made a huge difference right away. And I was like, what? You can feel like this? You can just feel like, okay, you can just go to bed at night and go to sleep? Is that allowed?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stigma around that is breaking off too, because there's also, and this is something I hope really becomes, mainstream, because therapy and mental illness is becoming a larger part of the conversation because we have to talk about it because it's real. It's causing effects in the world. It's causing effects in our own individual little tiny planets and all of that stuff. I fucking love therapy. I wake up the day of therapy like Matt Damon. Let the healing begin. Like I'm excited to go. You know what I mean? Even if I know like I've got some heavy shit to dive into today, I know that I'm going to come out the other side of it with tools or a tool that I need, that the next time something like that comes up that I go, oh, I got a thing. I got a little thing for this. I know something for this. But the other thing too is that you can try a medication or therapy and then drop it if it's not what's working for you. If you're paired up with somebody that understands what you're going through, you can go, I don't know if this is working. It's not like it's not a mental institution where they make you have a pill.
Where you're like, well, now I'm on this for the rest of my life. But instead it's like, hey, here's you. You're this basically vat of chemicals and hormones and just different things that are all interacting with yourself, and that's what makes you a person.
Mm-hmm.
And we alter our body chemistry all the time with
Mhm.
everything that we do. So whether you drink to cope with things, whether you do other drugs, whether you know, meditate, whether you go for runs, there are so many ways like those release, you know,
Different
dopamine,
stuff,
like
yeah.
whatever you choose to
Mhm.
do, like they work for some people, not for others,
Mhm.
because everybody's different. Everybody's a different vat of chemicals. But the idea that like, hey, you introduce this thing into your body chemistry and it can actually, you know, it can sort of open gates that were closed. It can sort of raise walls that need to be raised to keep
Mm.
certain things in a manageable form. And that was the thing that I didn't quite understand. Even though I knew practically, like, you know, I have people in my family with chronic illness, so they rely on um constant medication of you know, like diabetes. Like it's
Yeah,
like you have to
yeah.
take insulin because your body does not produce insulin.
Mhm, mhm.
And you have to administer it constantly. It doesn't make you less of a person. It doesn't make you less you.
No,
You
yeah,
just need
no.
insulin so that your blood sugar can be processed by your
Mhm.
body. For whatever reason, your body's not naturally doing that. It needs a hand.
Same is
It
true with
doesn't
the
make you
mind.
any less strong. It
Yeah.
doesn't make you any less real. It just means that some process in your body has gotten
Mhm.
is not working the
It's
way it's supposed
interrupted,
to.
yeah.
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 And so that's something that, like, I understood that in my heart, but I still just I didn't want help. I wanted to be able to do it all myself, and I thought that would mean I was a strong person, but it's something that's, like, the difference has been so huge, and even just sometimes I'm like, "Does this just help me sleep at night?" Even if that's all it does, I'm like, "I sleep at night. Oh my god, this is amazing.
Right, right.
I sleep through the night. I
Yeah.
love it.
Uh-huh.
It's great."
Mhm.
It helps me so much because the feelings that come, it's like, I still feel them. They're still strong. They're
Mhm.
still agonizing sometimes. However, I know what's real and what isn't. So it is
Yes.
sort of just like you can sort through it. It's
Yeah.
something that is like I'm still just figuring it out. Still pretty new to
Mhm.
all of this, but I think it's important to talk about because
It
I think
is.
that we put on these strong fronts and not just strong even, just like the idea that like we haven't figured out that we're all doing great.
Mm.
Like the idea of like I'm together. I'm fine. Like
Mm.
you see people like that all the time who are just like, I have this thing. I've got my partner. I've got my beautiful house. I go on these vacations. I have these beautiful clothes. I'm doing good. And you're like, well, geez, I don't have those things.
Can't relate.
But
Yeah.
like, you know, that's what it means to be a whole person. So I have to
Mhm.
try and have that instead of being like, you know what, none of us are whole. None of us are have figured it all out. And it's even if someone looks like they have everything, so often there's this thing that just is like, you know, so many things that you have to like struggle with that everyone has their own fight.
Mhm.
And I think that if we can be honest about that, I think the pressure to be perfect, to be always strong, to be always on, to be always together, I think that would go away a little bit.
Mm.
If like, you know, and it takes people, you know, discussing it even privately with each other. Uh, I felt like as soon as I actually started exploring medication as an option, I started talking to my friends and I realized how many of them were also medicated. And that, you know, it lowered my alert. Like it made me
Yeah.
less scared
Yeah.
because it was just like, of course, they're my friends.
Mhm.
They are they have certain things that they struggle with that their body is not maybe naturally doing for them
Yep.
and it's just a part of their life.
Mhm.
And it just, you know, and I think that that sort of it lowered my defenses and it made me more yeah, it made me realize that there was something that I could be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
And the fact that it didn't destroy your
Mhm.
creativity,
Yeah.
which is what everybody tells you. They'll tell
Yeah.
you it's gonna
That was my
it's gonna
therapist
turn you into
said.
a zombie. It's gonna make you, you know, because I had a friend who said, I take medication so I don't experience any high highs or any low lows. And I can sort of just coast through life, right? We all have a different
Mhm.
body chemistry and mental chemistry so
Yeah.
that things affect us in different
Mhm.
ways. And I always thought of that when someone brought that up is I go, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to coast through life and be a zombie. Everything that I write, everything that I create, every song that I do, is lives
Mhm.
in that up and down, in that
Mhm.
wave, and that's where art most of the
Mhm.
time comes from in a lot of us,
Yeah.
rather than just from the mind. And I was so worried about that being taken away, but then you realize that's an illusion.
Yeah.
Life, there's no amount of medication that cannot make what life
Yeah.
throws at you give you those high highs and low lows, right?
'Cause I've actually
Yeah.
never, I've never said it well, I've said it before, but I haven't, said it publicly before, but, so I'm bipolar.
Right,
So
yeah.
that was the diagnosis that I received,
Mhm.
and it was something that I had been experiencing for many years, but, like, there were times when I was okay, because
Mhm.
that's kinda how it works.
That's how it
It
works.
sorta comes in
Yeah.
cycles.
Mhm.
So, other times I'm like, "I feel great." So, like, nothing could really be wrong because I'm on top of the world right now. And, like, I think that that's the perception of it, is that sometimes you feel really good,
Mhm.
sometimes you feel really bad, but maybe the bad times are okay because sometimes you feel really good.
Right,
And
yeah.
it wasn't until it was actually a Carrie Fisher quote because she was bipolar,
Mhm. Mhm.
and was very outspoken about it. And she was describing it to a child who asked her this in a panel, and he asked her I forget what he asked her, but she explained bipolar to him, and she's like, "Sometimes you're very sad, and sometimes you're very fast, and
Hmm.
sometimes you're both at once. Those are fun days."
Wow.
And I had
Yeah,
never heard it like that
wow.
before because it's not
Yeah.
happy and sad.
Mhm.
It is,
Mhm.
like, down and fast.
Yes.
And, like, the
Yes.
fast can be great because sometimes it means you get so much done, but sometimes it means that it's the end of the world
Mm.
and everything you do could be your doom,
Yes,
and you have to
devastation.
do everything you can to stop that, and you are just, like, vibrating,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
on another frequency, and
Mhm.
it's agonizing.
Mhm.
And so that was something it wasn't until I heard her describe it that way that it made sense to me. And that's sort of what medication does. It's like, I think, it was described to me as like, even when you're feeling great, you're like, I'm getting so much done. I'm going so fast. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I am awesome. I'm on top of things. I will never die. I can kill God.
Yeah.
Like, it's like
Yeah.
you're borrowing from your own store
Uh-huh.
of energy. You're
Yes.
going to crash after this.
Yeah.
You have to be careful that you are not like your ideal is like you might not be going as fast, but you're still you. You're still
Mm.
like you can work as hard, you can be as creative, you can be as fired up, but like you can't be drawing on stores that you don't have
Mm.
because
Yeah.
that will lead to a very long time
Big
of
burnout.
feeling just lost and
Yeah.
terrible and sad, and so that was, like, sort of, like, just realizing that, of thinking of it as, like, accounts, almost like bank accounts. I'm just
Mhm.
like, "You can't take out more than you have,
Mhm.
or you'll be sorry."
Right, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, figure out a way that you only draw out what you need, and you work with that, but it's not it's not making everything gray. It's not, like, turning into someone who's
Mm.
just a robot who just does things and just powers through. It's like you are just you can see clearly. So that it's hard to describe.
I know what you mean, though. You're able to be yourself in a way that the core of who you are isn't adjusted by stuff outside of your control
Mhm.
so extremely on either end
Mhm.
of the spectrum. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I think there's something it's like my like when I'm on my high side of things, I'm
Mhm.
like, I am gonna get so much done.
Mhm.
So sometimes if something happens and it's like, oh, maybe I think my friend is mad at me. What can I do about that? So normally you're like, my friend didn't return my text in the first 5 minutes that I sent it. Well, they might be busy. Maybe they're in the shower. And that's your normal brain. But sometimes when you're like, in a heightened state like that, you're like, my friend didn't return my text. They must hate me. It
What did
must be
I
because of
do? What did I
maybe I did
say?
this thing. It was this thing I
Yep.
did. They hate me because of that. I have to do
Mhm.
this. I have to fix this. I have to fix this now. I'm gonna fix it right now. Maybe I'll do it by doing this. Like,
Before you
and
know
that's
it,
how
you've
it
sent
feels.
you've
Before you
sent 20
know,
unanswered texts, and they go, "I was in
yeah,
the shower."
your
Yeah.
pin, you think it's here, but it's
Mhm.
here. And
Mhm.
you're reacting to things that are here, and they're not real feelings. They are
Yeah.
things that are, you're interpreting things in your life incorrectly.
Hmm.
And that's really what it does. It gives you clarity. You might still feel the same things. Oh no, I'm afraid my friend is mad at me. But you also realize, well, if they're angry at me, the next time I see them, I will be very kind to them and I will maybe gently ask them if they are angry at me. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know that there's anything I can do about it right now, but I will, moving forward, try and figure out how to resolve this so
Right.
that me and my friend are on good terms again.
Yeah.
So it's things that are like it cuts through the haze. It
Mhm.
cuts through
The noise,
the
yeah.
kind of dark clouds, and it's like, all right, no, but here's what's real. These feelings are real. These feelings are important, but they might not be fully real.
Hmm.
They might be they might be a result of
Mhm.
you being turned around in some way. And
Yeah.
so that's what it does for me. It really it just gives me the ability to see which direction I'm going.
Perspective.
And yeah, so it has been, it seems in so many ways like such a subtle change because I don't really feel that it's changed my, even my quirks, even my like weird jittery habits that like I associate with it. It hasn't really gone away.
Yeah.
Um it just allows me to sort of recognize what's going on in a
Hmm.
way that's been very, very powerful for me.
Yeah.
And also, I love sleeping. Sleeping is great.
Sleeping is nice.
I love it. Have you
Turns out
tried it?
turns out good for the body, good
It's
for the
great. It's
mind.
just delightful. So
Well,
yeah.
thank you for
Yeah,
talking about that.
yeah. It's yeah. I've never talked about it in a public forum before, but I also do think that it's important to discuss because
There's a lot of
it's a
us out
common,
there.
yeah, it's a common thing. There are
Mhm.
a lot of people that are like, I think that the exception is the people who aren't anxious or depressed or, suffering from any number of imbalances of the mind. Like, and it doesn't make you broken and it doesn't make you lesser and it doesn't make you weak.
No,
It just means that
makes you human.
you have different things in
Mhm.
your life to try and figure out and try to puzzle through.
Yeah,
So,
and when we were young, people weren't really talking about it, and the fact that we're sitting here talking about it
yeah,
is hopefully an inspiration to those people.
yeah.
Yeah. You are a storyteller at what I think is at the beginning of your career, the very
Hope so.
beginning, the very
That'd
beginning
be
of your
ideal.
career. Um, Going forward, what type of stories do you want to tell? What type of stories are you interested in telling? What do you want to put out into the world? To continue to put out into the world, let me say that.
Yeah. I'm interested in what makes us human.
Hmm.
And maybe that's a very, I don't know, I guess all creators have some version of that, but I think that the stories that I'm interested in and the characters that I'm interested in, they embody both what we want to be and what we're afraid that we might be. And so, using characters as a way to explore those things. I talked a little bit about Nimona being, in so many ways, so therapeutic for me
Mhm.
because it allowed me to explore. I think this is why I like villains a lot. Maybe there's this part of me that's dark. I don't want to look at it because I don't want to admit that it's there.
Hmm.
But when you do look at it and you think, okay, I'm going to give shape to this darkness, I'm going to explore this through a character. What are the consequences for their behavior? Can they be redeemed? What direction are they going? What, you know, if they have a hero that they're butting up against, what is the difference between those two people? It is an exploration, I think, of what we want to be and what we're afraid we might be.
Hmm.
So it's all tied back in. It's all about, I think ultimately it's like choice. It all comes down to choice for me.
Yeah.
Of kind of like, what do we choose and what are we forced to choose? What are we born with? How do we grow? And that's kind of, I think, the core of every story that I've told so far, and that I'm interested in telling in more ways still, of just what makes us who we are. Is it just the world that we're born into, just the family that we're born into, just the
Environment, right?
mindset that we're
Yeah.
born into? And how do we break free of that? And what does it mean to break free of that? And, you know, what are the extremes that you can go to on either side of that spectrum?
Hmm.
I think that that's the question that I've been like exploring and searching for through everything. It's just like, how do you be good? How do you be a good person? What goes into that?
Yeah.
are you a born a good person, or do you just have to work at it really, really hard?
Or is it a mixture of both? Is it
Yeah.
yeah.
And do some people have the same choice as other people,
Mhm.
you know? And it's like,
Mhm.
I think that's at the root of everything. So I think going forward, it's whatever. I love stories. I want to live in those worlds. I want to embody these characters. I want to explore what makes them tick. And also, I think the medium that allows those stories to take form, I'm interested in what goes into those mediums. Like
Right.
making a cartoon is different from making a comic in certain
Mhm.
ways, in lots of ways. But there are certain things that set it apart. So, what makes it special? What makes it special to be making a cartoon as opposed to a comic, and
Mm.
vice versa?
Mm.
Like, what about that process do you love? And so going forward, I think it's just like, all right, like, well, what's the next interesting thing to explore? What's the next thing that, like, to learn, to find, to make? I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to just like find more stories to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
There's so many different facets to the human condition,
mhm.
and a writer and an artist, I feel like that job is to continually be searching out and figuring out a way to express
Mhm.
that thing to the world in a way that makes them go, "Oh, I can attach to that in some way. I can relate to that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's through the form of a, superpowered princess.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a shapeshifter. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's something that's just totally mundane and of our world, but
Sometimes it's a
whatever.
blog post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever makes those feelings real, and whatever explores, those things that I think need to be explored. Like that's what I'm interested in, and that's what I'm excited to pursue.
Thank you so
It's
much for
got deep.
joining me. I love it. I'm
I
so
know.
happy. Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Thank you for everything you've created and everything you will create.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I'm just saying in advance in case you didn't like me and you don't want to come,
I'm
come
out of
along
here.
anymore.
See ya.
This was really great.
Yeah, this was awesome.
This was really
Thank
great.
you. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing pictures from your wedding.
They'll be majestic.
Do you have plans? Are you going to
Yes.
do some sort of theme? Is there is there are you gonna be dressed as She-Ra? Is there gonna be some sort of like
Let me tell you, like, I think that, like, I had such an aversion to, like, the white wedding, and I still
Uh-huh.
do,
Uh-huh.
of, like, I'm like, "Ugh, I don't wanna do all that." It's
Yeah.
like, "Let's just do it. Let's just, like, be together." And I still feel that way, but then it's like, once we get into it, we have a wedding planner.
Mm.
We try it on wedding dresses, and I'm like, "What am I doing? Why do I feel so magical? What's happening?" Like, I think that there are things in that where it's just like, well, why don't we just do it?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, fuck it.
this is great. Like,
Yeah.
it's so yeah, we have a wedding planner. We're gonna do like a woodsy, like, camp themed wedding
Oh,
because
that's
we're
awesome.
huge fucking lesbians. Um But yeah, it's like, yeah, we went to try on wedding dresses, and I was just like, well, I
Well,
love this, god damn it.
yeah.
Like,
Fine.
still probably won't wear a dress, but it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, it's nice to open yourself up to things that you maybe
Mhm.
close yourself off to because the way that they were presented to you was rigid or unappealing. And now
Yeah.
it's just like, well, we can kind of make our own rules. We can, like, do things in our terms. And that means that, like, sometimes it's nice to have a, like,
Mhm.
fairy princess, like,
Mhm.
magical thing, It's
Yep.
nice, yeah.
Put her on like a wedding dress.
Like a wedding pantsuit
Like
with
a wedding
cape.
pantsuit. Cheers, Noelle.
Cheers to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Translated to Old Square, the Vieux Carré references the French Quarter in the city of New Orleans. Created in 1938 by Walter Bergeron at the historic Hotel Monteleone, home of the infamous Carousel Bar, this spirit-forward libation is akin to a Manhattan. You may see this drink sometimes served up or on the rocks. For me, it's on the rocks. For this drink, you'll be stirring the ingredients, so grab your mixing glass or a regular pint glass will do. Here's what you'll need for this drink: rye whiskey, cognac, sweet vermouth, Benedictine, Peychaud's bitters, Angostura bitters, and 1 lemon. All right, you're gonna add 1 ounce of rye whiskey to your mixing glass. Then 1 ounce of cognac. 1 ounce of sweet vermouth. And 1/4 ounce of Benedictine. After that, you're gonna do a dash of Peychaud's bitters and a dash of Angostura bitters. Then you're gonna stir all the ingredients, so make sure to fill your mixing glass and your cocktail glass with ice. Next, we're gonna stir it. Strain into your rocks glass over cubes or large ice. Then we're gonna take a lemon peel, express, and garnish with the peel. And there you have it, a Vieux Carré. Its smooth mouthfeel, high ABV, and rich texture make it the perfect drink for a long, contemplative sip. Like this one. Thank you so much for watching Between the Sheets. New episodes are uploaded to YouTube on Wednesdays, and if you want to watch the show live, it airs at 7 p.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/Critical Role. Thanks for joining us.